Okay, if you guys remember last week, I asked if anyone wanted to volunteer to be your new class rep. Well, your class is super lucky because 2 individuals volunteered. One of them's here tonight and the other one is going to be online. And Sophia, you want to come up here? And so Marley Moats and Sophia Garza both volunteered. And since your class is large, we thought it'd be great to have 2. And they agreed to be new class directors. So if you'd like to introduce yourself.
I wore my best wolf shirt for you guys today. My name's Sophia. I am relatively new to all this, but baptism by fire. I like diving into things head first. That's why I'm doing like 4 things at once, and it's really crazy, but excited to do it. I have a passion for nature, and I really want to get into botany. I had a teacher who is also a member. I have not gotten to see him yet. I believe Joe Kowalski. He actually inspired me to do all this, so he's the reason I'm here, and I'm hoping to re-meet him and let him know that this is why I'm halfway through this career path.
Cool. Yeah. He was in last class. Yeah. So Robert, can you tell if Mara is online? Can she? Mara, can you unmute and introduce yourself? Thank you, Sophia. Okay, she's having a problem with her audio. We'll see if it'll work later, and if not, we can just have her introduce herself in the chat, and we'll let you know about her. So we're super excited because no arm twisting was necessary. Both Mara and Sophia, Marley and Sophia just jumped in there, so we're excited. So if you guys know, we sent you a pre-test. And most of you have filled it out. It's nothing you should worry about. It's really the way that they look at the program and see if it's effective. And so actually don't go out and Google the answers and do all that, because basically if they want you to, we would hope you don't know a lot. Just of course, you got Jacob. You put in. What was that word that you put in about the plants that move around? Oh, okay. Because I looked at, I was like, oh my. So anyway, if you knew everything when you started this, then the program would not be as effective. So hopefully, just answer them right, cold, and then at the end, then hopefully you'll know more. So. And then the class 1 quiz, most of you have realized you can retake the quiz. And then it lets you go back and retake it. If you say you got 8 out of 10, you can go back and retake it and get 10 out of 10. So anyway, it's just a little method for us to make sure at least you're opening your book, because a lot of people in the past complained that they never opened the book. And so open the book, and then this part of it's about the speaker that is online. So it's not meant to be super difficult. As I said earlier, you guys are doing a great job putting your hours in. And please let us know if you have questions. It is a whole different language and system, and Robert's good at he looks at it every single day and says, oh, people need to change this and that. But it's not meant you're not supposed to know what you're doing. After a while, I still have to ask the hours keepers, like, how am I supposed to, like, Adrian asked how she's supposed to put in the hours for going to classes and stuff. I didn't know. I had to ask. So anyway, I want you guys to know that there's some AT opportunities AT is advanced training, or like in other organizations, they call it continuing education or whatever. There's a lot of different things at like the different state parks, ACUS, the Audubon group. So these are all opportunities. Now remember, this is all recorded. So in a couple days, this will be up online and you guys can go through this. But yeah, these are just some.
I just want to make sure everybody knows that if you go into Facebook and you do a search for a hashtag, it pulls up anything and everything that that hashtag was tagged onto. And so we started using the hashtag RGVCTMN, our initials, _AT. So anything that we put out there, or anything that you find that you want to put out there, like who put the ocelot one?
Oh.
Like, yes. So she asked, can I put this out here? It's a volunteer opportunity. Absolutely. Just include that hashtag. That way we can all do a search in Facebook for RGVCTMN _AT, the little hashtag in the front, and that pulls up these AT opportunities for you. Now we're doing the same thing with an _volunteer for a volunteer opportunity. That way, when in doubt, go out there and take a look. But again, if you guys learn of something that you think, hey, wait a minute, this would be great, it fits our mission, we should be able to volunteer here, let us know. If they're not a partner, if you saw on the partner list that they're not a partner, there's a form, there's a process that we can go through there to get them approved. So we're trying to make it a little bit easier for you guys to look and find these opportunities, whether it's advanced training or volunteer.
Thank you for explaining that. I didn't know. I don't know about hashtags. So here's some volunteer opportunities that we, like you said, that we our members have made us aware of. The Friends of Laguna Azcosa and all the Ocelot Day. There's a beach cleanup this Saturday. There's Earth Day, lots of Earth Day opportunities. We're going to have a table, at least one or two of them, at Los Fresnos. And then WOWI, that's another one. I know a bunch of you have signed up. So WOWI is going to be on the island, and they want room monitors and things. And we're going to have a table there. So if you want to volunteer at our table, let us know, because the actual form to fill out goes to the WOWI people. But anything you do there will be volunteer opportunities. So, okay, so some of you need field trips and aren't going to be able to like fit in maybe to the schedule that we have. You maybe need to leave early, leave the valley early, or different things. So here's some opportunities for you on your own to go and get, if you want to, take a picture of this or whatever. But like Resaca de la Palma has a tram tour. So does Santa Ana and Estero. They have tram tours, and we know the people that do the tram tours. And so a lot of these you need to make reservations. I think Joyce figured out that when she tried to make a reservation, with the closest one was full. But and then of course WOWI has field trips, but all of these have some type of fee involved, either fee to get in the park or whatever. But just so you know, these would all be counted as field trips for your class. All you need to do, take a picture of yourself with the guide, just a selfie, and that way we know you were there, and send it to us, and we'll give you the credit. So, any questions about that? Right, all you need is 10 hours of field trips, and we're going to schedule more than 10 hours. But like I said, some people have schedules that just don't fit. When we look, the bulk of the people were available on Saturdays, and then a few less on Sundays, and then during the week it was like all over the place. So that's the challenge, and we're going to have them across the different counties up in Hidalgo, even Starr County. And so anyway, just, we want you to get your field trip hours, and we don't want their schedule to be a burden. A couple things about VMS. You need to enter complete descriptions about where you were, what you were doing, like pulled guinea grass and picked up trash at Hugh Ramsey Nature Park, field trip at Steck tonight, parrot count with ACUS training. This is how what you should say about the first class last week with Javier De Leon and then Tony Reisinger, and just a brief description of what they talked about. When you go in and you pick an opportunity, read what it says, because like when you pick maintaining native gardens, it actually says Ramsey Park and different things. So if you read that, you can sort of say, okay, this is the right place I should put this. Chapter meetings are an hour, and an hour AT. Like it's only for the speaker. It's not for, you don't get credit for the whole meeting. So the meeting is maybe an hour and a half, hour 45 minutes. And if the speaker part is an hour, then you're getting credit for an hour. If the speaker is like an hour and a half, we'll tell you, okay, you guys get an hour and a half credit. So, and one thing you might have learned already is the opportunities can't be changed after you save it. You can change other parts of it, but you can't change the opportunity that you picked. You have to go in, and there's a delete button at the bottom. You have to delete it, and then you have to redo it. So that's just the nature of the VMS system. So that's all the boring part. Tonight, we're going to have two great speakers in person, beginning with Rolando Garza, an archaeologist, talking about the archaeology of the RGV, and then the second half is going to be Barry Goldsmith from the National Weather Service and NOAA, and talking about weather and climate in the valley. And then next week we've got Dr. Jude Benavides from UTRGV talking about hydrology and Rosacos and the whole those systems, and then mammalogy with John Young, and he actually wrote part of the chapter about mammalogy of your textbook, and he's with TxDOT. So Rolando is archaeologist, chief of resource management at Palo Alto, and after receiving his BA in anthropology from the University of Texas in 1990, he worked on various cultural resource management projects throughout Texas and New Mexico. He joined the Park Service at the Southeast Archaeological Center, gaining invaluable experience investigating battlefields from the American Revolution, War of 1812, and the U.S. Civil War. And then in 2001 to 2022, he returned to his hometown of Brownsville. And we're very lucky. He's a great friend of our chapter, and he's a wealth of knowledge on archaeology, and he paid me to say all that.
Yeah, I absolutely know nothing about nothing. All right, let me see how to put this on. All right, thank y'all for indulging me. I think this should be fun. I have a lot of images, I believe. This is a very interesting PowerPoint presentation for me. But we'll just go ahead and start. Archeology. What's archaeology? The study of past human culture through the material culture remains utilizing the scientific method. It's a sub-discipline of anthropology, which is scientific study of humans. So we're part from history, historical, although a lot of historians don't consider us scientists, but we are. I've never worked in Egypt, but I would love to. But the Rio Grande Delta is where I grew up, where I was raised. In archaeological terms, this is what we define as the Rio Grande Delta. Out there so you can see it. but we start off with the Paleo-Indian period, which are the big game hunters, which we did have them down here. Okay, one thing to clarify, back, when was it? Paleo for this period, for this area, starts about 12,000 years ago. The coastline was way out there. The actual, the water, the shoreline was quite a bit out to where the shelf is right now. But these are the points. They're Folsom, Clovis, Angostura. These are pretty much all over North America, including Mexico and down south. It's amazing. It's technology. And we base it on technology. When I talk about, we're going to be talking about technological shifts that we mark cultures. Because, of course, archaeologists are here. We're putting names on things that we have no idea, that we're coming centuries, millennial later to millennials, right? We're coming millennials, right? Centuries afterwards and putting names on stuff. It's arbitrary. So the Archaic period is something we came up, and we have no names, but for this area, I'm not sure. Let me just take a peek what's next. For this area, it is small bands of people, small bands of tribe roaming huge amounts of range area hunting. Okay, there were some mastodon out here, and actually just outside of Reynosa, they have some evidence of a lithic inserted into a mastodon skeletal remains. But mainly by this period down here, they're hunting modern large game herds, the deer, pronghorn, antelope, and such. Not nilgai because they weren't around. That came this our lifetime. And then we shifted to the Archaic, which was the introduction of atlatl. And that starts about 7,000 years. The atlatl is serves as, okay, so the Paleo-Indian, they're just using points on spear shafts and all that. Now they're using this because their game is getting smaller and faster, and they had to adapt. They had to adapt so they could eat and feed their kids. And so they had this. This really, it affected the range and velocity of their shot. And we've had it. I don't know, have any of y'all ever tried to throw an atlatl? Have any of y'all seen one? We've had them before. Back when I used to work at Palo Alto Battlefield, we'd had this archaeology fair every October. And thanks to the folks at the chaps at UTRGV, we'd have atlatl demonstration where you could try. And it really works, although it takes some practice to be good at it. But you could really throw a lot farther and harder and faster with a smaller point. Good for deer and all that. Here are some of the early archaic points. So 8,000, about 4,500 years ago. And this is a regional wide. This is huge. You see these early archaic points up in the hill country of Texas. These style here, now that I was going to say their names, I totally went blank. Said for these because I know nothing about nothing. But I'll go to the local points. The middle archaic, these are becoming more regionalized. These are the Absolo and the Catan points right here. They're triangular points. And during the middle archaic, it was like a population boom. Okay, one, you do get the stabilization of the shoreline about where it is nowadays. But it was a population boom, but they're hunting a much more wide resource. Everything out there. We find out they're having, the first time they have in archaeological context, smoking pipes, some apparatus, that life is not just about subsistence. You also get them hunting, you get other tools, which down here, you're not going to find a rabbit stick in archaic context, but up in drier places and caves, as you do get a little further up the Rio Grande River, you can find rabbit sticks and tats. Of course, that's a dude from the 20th century Arizona still hunting with a rabbit stick right there. Then, like I said, the middle archaic, you get the modern estuary. Okay, so back to our talk out there about the lomas. Out here, down here, Big Loma, we had most of what we know in archaeology about Cameron County, was collected back in the 20s and 40s, or the foundation of what we know, let me rephrase that, was by by this, I'm sorry, because names are slipping me, A.E. Anderson. A.E. Anderson, he was a county engineer out here, but he systematically collected resources from there and mapped them in. And his collection is up at Texas Archaeological Research Laboratory in Austin, part of the UT campus. And we don't, but this D form, that is Loma Alta Lake off of 511. But the Lomas are all on the northwest side in a big like circular thing around these little blowouts, because of our main direction of wind is coming from the southeast. So all these, if you go out here, these big lomas that we have out here, Bahia Grande, and out there, even some of the lomas out there near Boca Chica Beach, which are really nice little habitats, are out around the shallows, kind of forming an arc around these little water bodies. And they are very unique landform in the world. The late Archaic, like I said, these triangular points coming in, more specified going in. Then you get to the late prehistoric, which you have the introduction of bow and arrow. Those are star points, and these are Cameron points right here. And you see they kind of shifted from the regional Archaic ones, the late Archaic, which were just triangular points, into this, and not the stem. Further up in the hill country, you have all these stem points, even in the late prehistoric period. But for some reason, the people down here did not feel they needed to have stems when they were mounting their points on shaft, the projectile points on shaft. Cameron, like the name, Cameron, like the county, and star points were the ones with just the triangle. But there are three things that set aside the late prehistoric culture down, which is called the Brownsville complex in archaeological literature. One, they had a sophisticated shell working industry. Because, okay, who lived in Cameron County? Everybody? No? Okay, who's walked around Cameron County out in the nature? What do you find? What do you not find? Rocks. Yeah, we don't have any rocks. We're living on meters upon meters of alluvial sediments. And so we use shell. They develop a sophisticated shell working industry. This is one of the main natural resources, the Colomea, the well conch, lightning well conch, that's what it's called, sorry. Yeah, forgive me, I'm a little slow right now. Because I know nothing about nothing. All right, but that's the lightning well. This is the way you think. You can see they have a cut and groove. They come with a little stone blade, and they'll wear it into. I think I have a better example of that coming in there. These are little points they made, little thing for the Colomea shaft. That they would haft it on reeds and shaft and use that for gigging flounder or whatever they wanted to spear or gig. Then they also make ornaments. I'll tell you, they had a very sophisticated shell working industry down here. Little danglers on them, decorated. They'd be all decorated on there. Okay, here it is. You can see they would come in with a little stone and then kind of cut out a groove, and they could snap it. And they'd use these to make all sorts of beads, gorgets. The cool thing, last April, we went out with the archaeologist from Fish and Wildlife who just started out here, and took one of the old collectors from down, and he took us to a site that out here on Bahia Grande on Fish and Wildlife, because the February before there was a human burial out there, which I was able to date to be prehistoric. There was no artifacts with it, but just because of the teeth, the way they were, they had shovel shaped inside, but there was no cavity. There was no effects of modern human beings, sugar, and all that, which we all have issues with cavities. They were there. They were just worn to about half. Anyway, because of that, we went down there. This guy showed us the site. We found all sorts of circular beads like this out there. If I would have been a little bit prepared, I would have sent Robert a picture to put into here. But it's just made, and that was a productive site. I had some people from the Texas Historical Commission down here, and we all realized that, yeah, that's why so many of the sites, when we have 106 projects, like happened with the LNG projects or SpaceX, that the prehistoric sites in Cameron County get how would you say, blown off. They're minimalized. Oh, there's nothing here. There's nothing there's nothing that would make it eligible for the National Register. No, but that's all we have. That is all. It's not like anywhere else in Texas. This is a unique resource, and that's all we have. And if we want to understand it, we need to protect what we have so we can understand it a little better. These are just some more ornaments I'll be going through. And these are hooks. They were mainly used as awls for punching leather, hide, whatever you need an awl for. They were good. But we definitely don't know all the uses they had. That's our interpretation based upon what we find. And the problem with the Rio Grande Delta, especially in Cameron County, there have been very, very little systematic, scientific excavations done here. Maybe I had 2 that I can think of, 2 or 3. Most of our knowledge comes from the collections of surface artifacts. Yes. Yeah, late prehistoric and archaic as well. It was during the whole, definitely during the archaic period when they started advancing all that, but definitely late prehistoric into protohistoric. And here's one decorated. This is a photograph that I didn't do. You can tell because it looks nice. These are scrapers, and these are some of the raw shell tools that do the senior scrapers. Really effective for scaling fish. I know I tried it. The quahog, the cockle shell, and then the pumice stones that wash up on shore. You can still find pumice washing up. It's not necessarily have been cultural, but they still wash up as they did back then. And they would use as a braiding stones for either softening hides or even ceramics. And that's the other thing, that sets us apart down here, which hopefully I'll get to soon. These are columnar. These are another big part of the oliva shell danglers. They would put coyote teeth inside of them and then treacle as you walk on. They have them all around. They have bands around their arms, their legs, all over. Yeah, they'd be highly decorated individuals out here. Here's a burial, the typical burial. The burial I did was somewhat similar, except that it was on the shoreline. It had slumped off of a part of the thing. It slumped off it, but they're all in flex burials. The bones are kind of jumbled. You can see a few artifacts in here, but the next slide shows the artifacts from the burial. Here's the mandible right there. There's the top of the skull, of course, some long bones. Seems like a lot of bones for one person, but I don't know. But sorry, but these are all coming out, and these are bone ornaments too. There's a coyote tooth in the oliva shell, the beads, all these little shells that you find out on the beach with preparation, which are naturally occurring, I believe, were also picked up and used as ornaments and all that. So they used the sophisticated, there's one that said 3 traits. The second one, they had trade with Mesoamerica. They would use these shell ornaments to use for trade for Mesoamerica. One was jadeite. That's just a picture I got off the internet. Serpentine, another material that we have found in archaeological research. But obsidian is a key one because we were able to source it to different sources in Mexico. And all these artifacts that I talk about, they're all coming out of that were sourced, and they're coming out of the literature, but they're all out of the Anderson collection up in Austin, up at Taro, Texas Archaeological Research Laboratory. And I got lucky. One of my good friends had really studied a lot, Dr. Tom Hester, who's still around, still publishing, although he's getting up there in years. But he really had a focus on this. And Tim Pertla, have given us a lot of information on the South Texas history by synthesizing what we have up there at the Anderson collection. If I said Hunter earlier, that was my mistake. But yeah, the other thing, so we have that because of that trade with Mesoamerica, we have ceramics out here, which is unusual. They made some here, but a lot were imported straight from the Huasteca region. Huasteca region, this vessel right here is part of the Anderson collection. It has these drawings, which is definitely Huastecan in nature. Coming out here, trying to think. So the Huastecan regions down here, so they were interliers. They didn't produce obsidian. They were just the middlemen in the trade between Mesoamerica and the late prehistoric in Brownsville. And which leads us to, and I'm not sure if I have this right or not. I do not know what the next slide is going to be. No, it wasn't wrong, so I'll just go back. The third trait that we have here is burials, distinct burial locations. We have it up here at Bahia Grande on these big lomas. They put back and forth. They come back and rebury the dead, place after place out there. They'd hold them on. Yeah, they didn't have a huge range, but they would and bury. And that's what distinct. And that's where the ceramic vessels that we were able to put back together were found in the burial. There were burial goods that we found there. You don't find. We have, like I said, we have never dug a living site, a site that has been occupied. That the closest we come is the Garcia Pasture site, which is in where the Texas LNG is supposed to go. Hopefully, they do a good study if they decide to go forward with the Texas LNG. Hopefully, the Texas Historical Commission and people like Hester Perla and myself are able to hold the contractors to do a good study of it, because we have three. When Pruitt, who also a friend of mine, luckily a friend of mine, who came down and he did the first survey of Cameron County in 1971 at the behest of Curtis Tunnell, the state archaeologist. He recorded the Garcia. There's distinct working sites of shell working areas. A home site. It's on a big loma right there, which is now the ship channel goes right in front of it, or right to the east of it, southeast of it. But they also have a glass from a, well, you said early alcohol glass from a bottle from early Europeans down here. So that was used, occupied maybe about up to 1600 or so with a glass ceramic. And it was come, yeah. It's not it's unusual for a place like this, for proto-historic. Okay, then we go to the historic period, colonial period. Nueva Santander. Okay, so we study archaeology by what? The human race. So there is a lot of archaeology out here. We don't have stone. What do we have? We have brick. We don't have big wood. What lasts? Brick lasts forever once it's fired and all that. So you go up Roma, down here all the way to change, Matamoros. There is a lot of historic archaeology to be done to that. To my knowledge, there hasn't been a lot of big investigation to the colonial period in this area. There is some master's theses that are out there, but that's about it. And it's been more looking at the family and not really digging or anything like that. But it's been more looking at the family, tracing the family lineages around there, which those are pretty cool and pretty good studies. And at that, I also got to give a shout out to Dr. Russell Skronik, who came down here from California. He's a Spanish colonial archaeologist from California, but his wife came down to UT Pan American first, and he came down over. He took over the Pozorskis. The Pozorskis were great archaeologists, but they studied in Peru, in Inca. They were Incan archaeologists. They were great. But what Russ did, he created the community historic archaeology program in schools, and he got the local student body interested in studying local families and local history. And they've done a lot. They created the Civil War Trail down here. Russ has done a lot to help the community down here, both in Cameron and mainly in Hidalgo, but both in Hidalgo and Cameron County, especially now as UT RGV has merged. But we'll go on with that. But my forte, based upon coming back working at Palo Alto Battlefield, is the Civil War. I mean, is battlefield archaeology. And I worked at Palo Alto for like 20 years or so. So I know the Mexican War, the annexation of Texas. My family was here, well, somewhere in colonial Mexico along the Rio Grande River in the 1840s on both sides, I believe. Mount and Delta, we have these three battlefields. I'll go quickly. I have no idea how time we are. Fort Polk, or the Port Isabel, with the lighthouse. The lighthouse is built in the old ruins of Fort Polk. Some of this has eroded out, but the lighthouse was built in 1853 in the ruins of that. And in the spring of 1846, 40 minutes. Okay, good. I'll slow down. Oh, I still got a lot of presentation, right? Okay, 40 minutes. I can slow down. So in 1845, let me go back then. 1845, the summer of 1845, Texas was annexed as a state into the United States. President Polk, who had been trying as a senator to get part of California, New Mexico into the United States, was now president. And his main goal was the West Coast. We're going to go to the Pacific Ocean. And his first step was annexing Texas, and he guaranteed them the Rio Grande River, the southern boundary of Texas. Now, I guarantee the people that were living on the Rio Grande River did not consider themselves Texas, even though Texas acted as an independent nation from 1836 to 1845 with this boundary. But this was still colonial. This was still no man's land, because what do they not have? They not only do not have rocks on here, but they do not have a lot of water in this part. And so it was kind of big brushland territory, like it is now. It's not habitated that much, right? That's the one thing when you do archaeology and you look at that. People settle, people live where people always live, because what they need water. Yeah, so it's a big thing. So anyway, that summer, President Polk and Zachary Taylor were half of the U.S. Standing Army, which was only about 5,000 troops, to Corpus Christi up on the Nueces River. And this is the disputed territory, because Mexico still claimed this to be their territory. This hash line, Mexico still claimed this. Meanwhile, while this is going on, Polk is trying to come to peaceful terms, negotiation with Mexico. I should remember this dude's name, but I don't. But they rebuffed a negotiator down there, Slidell. They rebuffed him, sent him back running out of Mexico, and that's when, in the spring of 1846, Polk sent Taylor on down to set up a fort. Taylor decided to start a earthen construction fort on the opposite banks of Matamoros, using the natural channel of Brazos Santiago, where the jetties are. Where the jetties are. That was always the natural deep pass there. And then use the river, because that was okay by boat a little bit, but it was such a shallow draft. You'd have to park the big boats there and either go across the bay or come up the river like that to get your supplies up. And at this time, you're having big river boats coming in now too. And the traffic, they wouldn't be able to go all the way up to Laredo. So the Battle of Palo Alto, because May 8th, 1846. Archaeology. We're not talking history, we're talking archaeology. Okay, we know the battle. We're pretty sure. By the time we got the park, we knew where it was. Charlie Hecker did work in 92 and 93 there. We identified that, yeah, this is the core battlefield area. And you look, and you go back to the map, you're able to put, if you use the historic, that's a good thing about the historic archaeology. You get you got a lot more information. I meant to say earlier, archaeology is a lot like putting together a jigsaw puzzle. With historic archaeology, you have a lot more information at your behest, so you can have a lot more pictures of the puzzle present. You just got to be able to tie it down, confirm it. Okay, because what happens? What happens in anything that's written down? Yeah, look, I'm sorry to call you out. You don't have to know. Okay, we don't either. When you write something down, well, in everything that's written down, what happens? But is it accurate? Is it biased? It's a, yeah, exactly. Exactly. That's it. I'm sorry to put you on the spot. You can throw your pencil at me next time, okay? but yeah. So we got a lot more pictures of the puzzle, but they're all over the place. And you just follow one. If you just want to, if you just want to look at, that's okay. If you just want to look at the American side, you're gonna have a totally different picture. Actually, if you just want to look at the what's recorded in the 5th Infantry versus the 8th Infantry, you're gonna have a totally different picture of how the battle unfolded, because each side is saying how the people in the 8th are saying how they carried the battle and how the victory is all on them, while the people on the other side, on the other flank, are saying, hey, no, we're the ones who took off the Mexican cavalry charge. What are you talking about? If it wasn't for us, we wouldn't have won this battle. But to be honest, nobody won the Battle of Palo Alto. It was a draw. It was a military. It was actually more of a artillery duel. Neither side gave up the field because of dusk, which was customary. The Mexican War ushered out the end of Napoleonic warfare, where it was kind of a gentleman's war. We'll say we're going to meet here. There's a lot of honor involved. Taylor came on the field. General Taylor came on the field of Palo Alto the afternoon of May 8th. The Mexican army was already lined up waiting for him. They let him get his soldiers watered, the soldiers' horses watered, and formed their battle line before opening fire. And instead of just starting to pounce on him while he was vulnerable. That's the way. So when dusk came, they had a ceasefire because it's customary, and the thing is, the Mexican army fared a lot worse at Palo Alto because of the artillery. The Americans were ready for artillery. Actually, if it wasn't for two 18-pounders that weren't going to be used in battle, they weren't meant to be used in battle, they were taken to the fort, Taylor decided to pull them up. I think that's what held the Mexican army, because you see they had more people out there on the field, but because those two 18-pounders really held them at bay, because it's a lot different. They gauged the cannon fire by the size of a solid cannon, by the size of the cannonball. That's how, so 6-pounders. The other thing, so we had these two batteries, Ringgold's and Duncan's battery, are 6-pounder guns. So that's just a ball like that big. 18-pounders are huge balls, and they had exploding, both teams. And that's the other myth that you can even hear in the film at Palo Alto, that the Mexican only fired solid copper balls. That's untrue. Both armies, archaeology proves that both armies had access to the same 3 types of ammunition: solid ball, canister shot, which is a hollowed out cannonball with explosive in it to make it explode above and on top, and then canister shot, which turns into the cannons like a shotgun shell. Thank you. Anyway, I'm going to get to archaeology soon and quit talking history. Okay, so part of the historic record. Okay, so back at the beginning of the 20th century, Fort Brown troops would use this as an artillery range. So these lines, this is the state boundary. This orange one is National Historic Landmark boundary. This state boundary. This is the 3,400 acre that is the park boundary. This is what the park owns right here, and they're still working on getting this middle part, which is that. So that's part of the historic record going all over the place, and then the National Historic Landmark. So we knew it was in here. So what we did, we had it. I knew the study in there. This is what the battlefield looked like. So we had we had a push. We just opened in 2004, and there was a push to build more trails. We had a visitor center and all that, and I didn't have money. It takes a lot of money to do archaeology and curate everything. So on a shoestring budget, about 20 grand a year, I imposed the UTM 200-meter grid on this so we could checkerboard it out and do it with just the price of getting partners down. I partnered with my old people at Southeast Archaeological Center, CRJRS, Charles Heckard from the Southwest System Support Office, and Doug Scott from the Midwest Archaeological Center. Doug Scott, he's the father of American battlefield archaeology. He did the monument work of the Battle of Little Bighorn back in the 80s. And he participated on all the stuff we down here, including the stuff we did at Fort Brown. I'm sorry I get away. But this is how we did. We mow it down. We divided it up. You'll see how I checkerboarded it up. We systematic low. We had the archaeologists from SEAC. We had volunteers coming out to help with the metal detectors. We had archaeologists on metal detectors. I'll highlight this guy right here. Robert Garcia. I went to high school with his wife, and when I came back when I was like in college, before I was working here, she said, oh, my husband does that because he worked with Charlie Hecker in 92, 93. Robert Garcia would work on every project I've ever done, including up to April over there at Palmito Ranch. There's a good guy, enthusiastic. Anyway, sorry. That's Charlie Hecker there. What's this? Tell her no, not right now. No. Approver. Oh. Okay, we were just using a mower with tractor, but I think at one time, Fish and Wildlife, when they had brushing area, they had a gyro track that we're able to use. Yeah, I think it's in here. And I use volunteers, the students from UT back before the measure, UT American. Actually, Maria is a contract archaeologist. She's working there. She went on. She was part of the anthropology club. Robin, I think she might be doing archaeology, but she's not. But definitely Maria is. That's Charlie Hecker down here. Did the work in 92. Okay. Okay, that's it. And the part of P is fine. So this will just go back through the process. Steve Kidd back there. Fragment of metal. I think it was I'm not exactly sure what it is from that. Maybe I'll put on my glasses I can see. It might be a canteen spout. I think it might be a lead canteen spout. But yeah, we found a lot. Okay, in the 6 years of field work that we did, we found over 3,000 something artifacts. So yeah, yeah. I definitely can't recall. That is a flattened out. It looks like it could be a lead canteen spout. Okay, they had they're metal canteens, but that have lead spouts. So you think these guys didn't get lead poisoning? So we GPS everything in. That would give us this. Even back then, we're getting within 30 centimeters accuracy. Even now, it's even better. Every night we come in. We'd have, so we have the different people in metal detector with backpacks, different archaeologists. They'd have their own MDET log, and then we combine them to one field specimen log every night. And then so we quality control every night and make sure so there's anything. So we'd put pin flags with the number of with the MDET hit on it in the ground, and the GPS dude was supposed to bend them over when he took the position. So the next day, if we had missing points, we could go back and hopefully find a straight flag or even a bent flag with it we could figure out, and that way we made sure to get everything in there. That was on a day-to-day basis. It's a lot going on for that, and of course we realized back when we did the archaeological compliance for the visitor center that we don't want to do projects in August. We want to do projects in February, March. Yeah. Okay, so you can see how I checkerboarded out. Like this is 1, 2, 3 right here, 7 out. You know, I was trying to get the most information because they wanted to build trails right away with the least amount of money and the least amount of effort. And then when we finally got project money in 2010, we were able to fill in all the gaps and fill. But we needed to do that to add the US line and Mexican line trail out in there. And then, of course, thanks to computers, get a big database, which we can plug into GIS programs, into our ArcGIS. And so, like, that's the 3,400 acres. We can also overlay the work that Charlie did in the 90s, set it up by groups, whatever you want, Mexican or US shot or unknown, representing the blue and the green and all that, are just parallel what you get whatever you want. You can play with it, the database, and play with it in there to tease out the information you got. That's a copper cannonball. The Mexicans were firing copper cannonballs. We didn't, but they also had iron cannonballs as well. That's an iron before and after conservation. Just the scale looks a little off, but that's the same ball. And so that's what I'm talking about. So those are copper canister versus iron canister. You see the difference. You can see the patterns, and that's why when we work on the patterns they're laying. You know that there's a battery up here that's signaling the American first line, and you see the line that's kind of at a cock. It's not straight up and down east to west like I had it on that first map where I had all the names. So that's the difference archaeology makes. It helps you identify specifically how the battle unfolded and what. And then we also use different stuff like this is surfer distribution maps where you get the weight. You can still see, you see these lines coming out like that. Yeah. I really thank Robert for putting this presentation together for me from an old one, but yeah, I'm not remembering all what's up there. But yeah, I'm just showing you the different ways that we can use the data that we have in the database to tease to get the information out the pattern we want. So we wrote a technical report on this in 6 weeks. Right now, there's a manuscript at A&M Press to put it into an A&M Press book for the general public. So hopefully that comes through. I ate them. What'd you ask? That's all right. We have a museum. Sorry, Adrian. We have a museum collection out there, so it's there, and it's actually if a valid researcher comes in with a question, we curate them. We have to do it. We go through conservation, and it's a continual process. Right now, we have our partner from the University of Arizona coming out there. We're doing critical conservation on some of the items, and it's mainly iron. The iron is a one object that doesn't, even if you conserve it, it will start to rust again at some point. There's some of the triggers. The lead, the brass are all pretty stable. So we have. I'm sorry to be a smarty, but yeah, we have a museum collection. It is at the battlefield right now at their headquarter office in there. This is 511. This is 511. So this is 1847 going to Los Fresnos. This is 511 right there. And that's just like, okay, what's wrong with this picture? Or what's wrong with this map? So you can figure this out. Yeah, okay. How come at a battlefield where we have 3,400 artifacts, we're only getting what? 7 insignias? 7 brass insignias? What's wrong with? There's something wrong with that, right? Or no? Okay, people are getting hit, people are getting wounded, people are dying. Their shit's falling off of their uniforms. I mean, their insignias are falling off of their uniforms. Sorry about that. Their doo-doo's falling out of the back of their trousers. Because yeah, we get it. Thank you, Adrian. The battlefield had been collected for decades before the park was able to do scientific work there. And that happens a lot. That happens all the time. Palmito Ranch battlefield is a good example. And just that's what it hurts. It does hurt. Collecting is harmful to the archaeological record because it takes pictures out of the puzzle for us. You know, I have tried to work with some collectors. I have I've been able to get some information and all that. But yeah, they'll go and they'll just want, hey, crew iron. We'll quit hunting for iron. We just want brass right now. We just want, they just want the cool stuff, right? But to us, it's more the information. It's not the artifacts. It's what the information as a whole brings us. It's not the artifact. To me, brass is the same as the iron cannonball and all that. It's all beautiful, but it's the information it carries because of the context it's in. Because when you get something out of context, it's meaningless. Okay, these are coins, dimes. This is cool. We found this seated 1841 dime right behind artillery button, right on the road, right where we figured where the U.S. was holding with the 2 18-pounders. Other than that, some of these are modern coins to early 20th century coins to some period coins. But yeah, those are just the coins we find. I don't know, for whatever reason, my boss in Florida taught me to collect all the coins. So I have a dog. I do follow what I learned sometimes. Yeah, these are the buttons out there. These are Mexicans. They didn't have this fancy US 3 that would have. This has a D for dragoons, a 3-piece. Like I said, we found an artillery button because it had an A, and the infantry had an I on them. But those that just came out in the 1830s or so, the street pardon like that. And that's the military buttons. Also, we should have a lot more military buttons out there on the battlefield aside from that. That just goes to show the holes in the archaeological record. That, I always call it the wrong thing. It is a spur. Yeah, I did it wrong. I usually call it a spur for some reason. It's a spur out there, American Dragoon spur. That is a mouthpiece for a bugle you found on the Mexican line, which is kind of telling. I remember my buddy Chuck got it kind of started because in the historic record, it talks about the American cannons hitting on the Mexican band because the instruments are telling the commands. The instruments are giving the commands of what to do during the battle because you can't hear an officer yelling or anything. So you're relying on drums and bugles to spread the commands and flags. And so the Americans focused on that. And we found that right on the Mexican line, which is pretty cool. And this is just ramrod guides from the Mexican British Brown. It's a British Brown Bess, but it's the muskets that the Mexicans use. And everywhere where we had a road, everywhere where our quadrats landed on the road, my buddy Chuck would say, hey, we're going to find a mini ball. That's a Civil War bullet. That's just because during the Civil War, there was so much activity all around here. They use all the roads, and yeah, the mini balls are all over the place. We also found an archaic point on the surface. That should not have been, I can't really explain it. It was a manuport. Somebody had it. I don't know when. Somebody dropped it there, but it was on the surface. And I know because I was the one who found it looking there. But we also did find, we do have a prehistoric site somewhere on the battlefield along the Restaca. I just found bits and pieces, but I never spent time to really look for it because it's protected. Once it was already on our property, there should be no harm. There's no erosion going on. Eventually, we'll get to inventory. I have a site, a general area for it. Eventually, we'll go down and look a little bit harder at it. But as long as the site's protected, there's no rush to get it. As long as there's no erosion or other stuff, it's not being collected, or are they going to build an LNG plant on top of it? They're safe, good. They're best left alone, unless you got the proper money to do it. Okay, well, you got to have a good research. If you're going to destroy a site, because archaeology is destructive science, you got to have a good research collection. Because in the future, as archaeology develops as a science, the techniques get more sophisticated, and you can learn a hell of a lot more with doing less destruction. Then we also had this. I told you they used it as an artillery range for the turn of the century troops prior to going into World War I. This is a fuse head from a 75 millimeter shell that they were using here. I don't know. I should be able to describe it better, but that's what it is. A nose cap. We had several of these out there, and they produce little 45 caliber musket balls. That was their shrapnel inside. So that led to a lot of confusion early on in the 70s with identifying the battlefield. But this is it. We got it. We defined the line, and actually, we didn't do too bad. Okay, this is the actual second Mexican line. I took out a lot of the artifacts in here because we just went on what we could identify on lead right there. Those are just lead shots out there. Those are kind of what the battle lines look like, which we really didn't have a clear idea. We had them east to west. Like if you go out there to Palo Alto battlefield and you see the flags are east to west, they should be cocked about 10 degrees or so. Then you get to the Battle of Resaca de la Palma. What time do I got, Robert? That's 20 minutes? All right, cool. Okay, Resaca de la Palma. Y'all know where Resaca de la Palma is? Perez, yeah, right in Palo Verde. Yeah. Okay, so this map is upside down, and with the north is facing to the bottom. Hannah's over here. Dairy Queen's over here. And that new fabulous Circle K is just up top. Anyway, this is what it looks like now, transposed over there. This is a 34-acre. This is what is a National Historic Landmark boundary. This is now part of the second unit of Palo Alto Battlefield. And I think the next slide does it. So yeah, so you do that. I turned that map over right. You see, Mexican troops were lined up all here, all the way around here. The heat of the battle, based on we did archaeology when we were doing the systematic stuff. We got one musket ball over here. What we found is we found some modern replica stuff over here, but that was from an encampment we had back in 2006 for education. But that was still exciting. But the heat of the battle took place over here. In fact, I mentioned Dr. Hester, who did so much work on the prehistoric down here. In '67, he came down here with Mike Collins, who was another grad student, and they excavated a mass burial of Mexican soldiers that were buried right here from the battle. But the heat part, the heart of the battle took place over here, and after 2 hours of intense fighting, they were able to penetrate and capture the Mexican camp. But it is still important that we preserve this 34 acres. Although to the battlefield, there were troops here. We didn't find a lot of the archaeological record here, but it is part of the battlefield. It is definitely part of the battlefield. Mexican troops were lying here. It is what helps us to remember, because for us, especially living here in the valley, it is important to remember this war, because this war forged a relationship between these two countries, and especially people, Americans of Mexican descent. It has such an important role on who we are as a people, and we got to understand our past. Just like we can't erase this, we can't pretend like history didn't happen. Yeah, history is ugly. A lot of shit. Today's ugly. You know, people are gonna look back. All those people with 21st century and 2023 were just downright ugly, mean people. Yeah, but you got to understand it for what it is. You got to take a honest, accurate look at it so we can try and learn and not repeat the same mistakes, not treat people the same way. Anyway, sorry to go on that one. But anyway, so we didn't have much. I'd already done my survey. The city of Brownsville got money to do an archaeological survey, so I had them do like a geophysical. They did shovel testing and some backhoe trenching to see. And yeah, that landform had been reworked because it was a polo field in the 60s. But you know, there's still a large portion of it intact. But it is the park's gateway into the community. They have big events there. You have friendly. Okay, Palo Alto, you don't want to have events because what do we have? Unlike here, we have a lot of rattlesnakes that come up in public right there and there. Yeah, I don't know. We used to do living history events, and there'd be people would go around. You see people rushing over there because there's a rattlesnake over there or something. So this is a lot safer. We didn't have the nighttime event of the memorial illumination over there. So, which is that's a memorial illumination. It's cool. It's beautiful. It's a good way to they used to light 8,000 candles to represent the 8,000 soldiers who fought in the campaign for Matamoros, both from the U.S. and Mexico. They do it November, usually the Saturday after Veterans Day. Okay, on to Fort Brown. The siege of Fort Brown, May 3rd to the 9th. Fort Brown, earthen fortification. To me, in my personal opinion, this is the rock star of the 3 sites because this still has standing ruins. There's standing architectural ruins out there on the site. Out here's a period map by Mansfield over there. Matamoros is over here. This part where Garcia's is and all that peninsula is still pretty good. The river has gone down a little bit, as migrated a little bit that way. But this was never occupied even into like the 1930s or 40s or so. Here's it on a modern day. You can see the river shifted a little bit. That's where it's at. This is I guess RGV campus over here and TSC over there. The Horseshoe Lake, which was there, which the Horseshoe Lake was there during that. That's a closer up, and I will try and hopefully have a better picture of the ruins. You can see the ruins right here. This is the standing ruins up to this, going to that. That's where it stops. Trying to figure out the shadow. Then this is the driving range of a golf course. Oh, no, that's weird. There's some weird shadows going on there, right? Okay, it's not just me. All right, maybe the next shot. But here's a standing parapet wall. Here's that big bastion over there. And it goes back way. This is a cannon right there. And then back there's a wall. You can actually walk and stand on the parapet walls that were constructed in 1846. There's the cannon. Yeah, it's on the south side of the levee. Right now, the board, I still think they got the compromised border fence, the green chain link fence up there. I don't know, it's been a while since I've been out there. But in 2011, after going to the Midwest Archaeological Center's geophysical workshop, archaeological perspective workshop, I convinced, we paid for the travel of the teachers and the educational materials, the park did, and we convinced Steve DeBoer, which is this dude right there, archaeologist, who that was his operation, to come down here and do a geophysical, put on that class, and then use Fort Brown as our school, as our field exercise. It's cool. So yeah, that's us. It's driving range. I have to give shout out to Bobby Lucio. Thank you, Bobby Lucio, for being such a good host to us and letting us do it. Actually, he was a good partner ever since, until he left the golf course. He was very good helping preserve the history out there. But yeah, we're doing ground penetrating radar, electric resistivity, magnetometer. I'm going to that. That is ground penetrating radar. That's Russ Gronick with a strange hat right there coming out. It was sunny. That and just students that from nationwide. We have people coming from nationwide. We even had an instructor coming from England out to be part of it. This is a pretty big operation, this archaeological prospection. It was cool that we had it, and we had it here in the hometown. This is a fluxing magnetometer. This is one of our, we had 2 instructors from England. This is one of them from England there, that dude right there. And you notice, if it looked funny, you cannot have any metal on your body when you're doing the magnetometer. So, supposedly these better not have been real zippers or so on there. I don't know. But he might have been running a machine. That is Steve DeBoer running that. You can see him there. And definitely archaeologists are a relaxed bunch of dressers. That's our other guy from England. Our instructor is Robin again, doing the electric resistivity. we thought the ground penetrating radar was going to give us the best amount of data. But this is the GPR work. It's not too bad. You can kind of make out the bastion coming out over here. This is magnetometer work. You can see the point of the bastion. You can see a triangle point right there. It's not just my imagination that. But look at the electric resistivity. It really shows. It really hits. It looks a little bit different, but it shows that there is subsurface integrity out there. And if you go back, the magnetometer, these are all metal hits. These are cannonballs or stuff that were shot into the fort that are still out there. And of course, these big things are the overhead power lines because it's not only like you can't have metal on you. Yeah, so those are throwing out a lot there too. So yeah, so Fort Brown, I don't think it looks anything like that today because it's been abandoned for, God, 7 years now, not more. That the golf course has been abandoned. I know this big black willow has fallen down. The things are still there, but you know there was legislation last year or so that he didn't want to come in. It's from the weather. Barry, yeah. No, TSC never owned it. They were on a lease. It was the International Boundary and Water Commission, and they're willing to give it to the park. There's legislation in Congress supposedly it passed, but they're doing a feasibility study. You know, that's the one thing about the government. you gotta develop a lot of patience, work with the government. So I think, okay, you can go, yeah, you can go. You can go out there. I mean, okay, me and my friends rode from Fort Brown all the way to Sable Palms on the levee. Border Patrol didn't like it, but they can't tell you anything. Boundary what? Yeah. Yeah. But it's public. Now, but okay, but you can go. You can, but boundary. It's International Boundary Water Commission owns that peninsula. And they're, you know, eventually it might come into the park. Who knows? It's hard to say. Yeah, but there's also so many open gates. Where'd you used to live? Oh, okay, yeah. Okay, I gotta do a shout out. That's my thing. I'll do a cañonazo for West Rail Trail. That's beautiful. It goes right in front of the old water treatment plant. If any of y'all ride bikes or hike, it's not officially open yet, but it's a wonderful trail. And it connects to the Belden Trail, which connects to the Linear Park Trail, which connects you all the way to Palo Alto Battlefield. So you can ride from the flea market all the way to downtown to Palo Alto Battlefield with staying on trail the whole way without having to ride on streets. It's a beautiful thing. The Browns, all shout out to Rose Gowan for that too, and everybody else supported her. All right, sorry. Where was I? Back. So after that, after a year, I forgot where I went. I don't know. Anyway, when we ended up in the fall of 1847, we ended up with the first time a U.S. Army occupied a foreign capital, and that would be in Mexico City. It's Zocalo there. And like I said, what started on these fields out here at Palo Alto, Resaca, Palma, and Fort Brown would lead to events that would forever change the face of the North American continent and forge the relationship between our two young republics. And you know, this stuff we're still dealing with, like the border wall, still dealing with it today. So it's good that we know about it and have it still up front in our history and try and have a most accurate depiction of what what is out there, because you can't just read one history book and know what it's about. You got to read everything you can to kind of get a better understanding, and especially Mexican authors on it. Okay, I'll move on to Civil War real quick. How much time do I got? 3 minutes? I can do this in 2. No, I can't, but we will. Sorry, Civil War. Y'all know the Battle of Palmito Ranch. Also, archaeology has proven this to be so involved in this. This is just Barrett. He's a U.S. commander there. On that, of course, Rip Ford, who was the commander there at Fort Brown with, I can't think of his partner, who didn't show up for the battlefield, who didn't really want Barrett, who didn't want Ford to go meet Barrett out there at Palmito. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. The beautiful thing about Palmito Ranch, the scenery, up until maybe 3 years ago, the scenery looks so much like it did back in 1860s, 1861, 1865 is when this battle took place. Just a wide open prairie with these natural lomas, all that. Of course, you know what's changing that environment out there, which I won't say, but that is the American Battlefield Protection thing of the running battle. It was a long running battle. The archaeology we did, we did this as a grant with Fish and Wildlife on Fish and Wildlife property. Then I got permission to get on Bobby Ledman's property. We did this, and we did this with the Texas Historical Commission, getting Tony Zavaleta's permission to go on some property he had right there. Basically, we got a handful of artifacts showing that was the heat of the battle. That was a core battlefield, May 13th, all that. It was a light running battle, very few casualties. These are what we got. These are some of the things we got. We did show, the evidence did prove, which I hope I got that. I know we're trying to go. Okay, yeah, the evidence did prove, let me go back one just to show you, just get space. This is the county road that goes out to Palmito Hill and all that. This is that Rocket Ranch shit, that Rocket Ranch stuff out there. Yes, the 45th Indiana did hold a picket line up in there, but they didn't suffer a lot of casualties. They ran the U.S. 60 color troop and the rest of the Federal Army were able to escape there. The Confederates played chase, but it was a pretty much quick battle based upon the archaeological record, which the record doesn't lie. It could be damaged, it could be impacted, it could be misinterpreted, but based upon what I saw out there and the density of artifacts, especially looking at all these places over here, it was a very quick battle. I'm very confident with that. And at that, I think that was close to 2 minutes. And I thank y'all very much. This is it's turned into an undeveloped landscape into an industrial looking landscape. That's nice. What zero digging? Oh, at Fort Brown? It wasn't our property. It was. We didn't have the money. We didn't have a good research design. Our research design, for the money we spent, we were able to confirm that there was subsurface integrity out there, and that's all we need to know. Now, if we come back later with a reason to dig, that would be something else. And what are we trying to accomplish? Well, that's what the research design. What are we trying to accomplish? We're going to impact that site. What are we going to be able to gain? Why do we think we're going to gain some new information that we can? That's really going to advance us, our understanding of the past. Yeah, no. That's why the magnetometer didn't work. The magnetometer, the ground penetrating radar, just doesn't work in this part of Cameron County. But it works in Hidalgo County real well, and as you get closer to Hidalgo County, but the electric resistivity worked like a dream. But it's just digging, why? What are you going to learn? Because you're going to impact it, is it worth what you're going to damage? It's like fixing this hernia. Is it going to be worth it to me? I don't know. Sorry. Sorry. I can't help it.
We're very lucky to have NOAA National Weather Service, Brownsville, Rio Grande Valley Warning Coordination Meteorologist. He is a 37-year veteran of the agency, and he's served Texas for the past 15 years. Prior to arriving in the Valley, he spent 9 years as a senior forecaster in Tampa Bay, Florida, and 5 years as a forecaster in the Baltimore, Washington, D.C. area, and 7 years at the national headquarters outside of Washington, D.C. He works with partners in public safety, media, academia, and environmental stewardship to prepare residents and visitors to the Rio Grande Valley for weather and climate hazards that can threaten life and livelihoods. So we appreciate all he does for keeping us all safe. So there, if you want to put that on.
So the mic is mine, so I'm going to clip.
Easy touches. So that allows people.
The WebExers.
Exactly.
Okay, hopefully everyone can hear me. If there's a thumbs up out there in webland, I know y'all can hear me in the room. But yeah, I just did a conference virtually where I was not in the room physically. I was the virtual one, and like 90% of the people were live for the first time in 3 years. So, but I didn't get funded this year. So I was on multiple panels. There were one panel and was chairing sessions, but nope, that wasn't good enough to get. Anyway, we won't go into that. So welcome everybody. I give this talk every year. Thanks for the invitation. I actually do it twice. I do it over here in the Lower Valley. I think the last 2 years we were virtual, and I do one more in the Upper Valley in FAR, which is I think going to be virtual again this year with the other group. So I think it's in 30 days, the 28th of February, I think I'm doing it. So Groundhog Day is coming. So what's going to be the rest of winter and spring? I'll give you a little preview at the end of what might be happening. But anyway, without further ado, I will get started. Everyone can see the screen. I'm going to step out of the way so I can look at my screen and see how things move. There they go. I start the talk every year with this, and you can read it on the screen. State of perpetual drought broken by the occasional catastrophic flood. And why do we say that? Because here in the Valley, and not just in the Valley, but across the state, we're going to focus on the Valley, particularly the Lower Valley this time around. Early June 2018, it was dry. This is actually near my neighborhood. And then a couple of weeks later, we were flooded. And then it dried out again by September, and by mid-September it rained and everything turned green, and some parts of the region had 20 inches of rainfall, and not from a tropical event, by the way, and it was flooded. So you keep on going. 2019, we had a big flood event in late June. We'll show that in a little detail shortly or a bit later. And then by March 2020, it was bone dry again. And then in July 2020, so now we're going left to right. Sorry about that, should be clockwise, but July 2020, that was Hurricane Hannah. In by March last year, it was dry again. And just so we keep it going, in Brownsville nearby, we had 13 inches of rainfall in like one day. And it looked like that on a road near my office where you could actually get through it. It was not even a Rosako, it was actually a drainage canal that just overflowed. It lasted for a couple days. But then I had ellipsis ... to drought again. And this was Starr County in last March and Brooks County this month. And so here in the Lower Valley, we're doing all right so far on drought, but across part of the region that we serve, which goes from here to the coastal plains up to the brush country, there's areas that are really dry. The last rain that they got was August 14th. It's a long time. We've had a lot of dry weather like this that you're seeing out there now, and in Brooks County, it's not good because a lot of grass growth, and that leads to potential for wildfire spread. So we'll talk about that a little bit later too. So let's go back to basics. Geography of the Valley. We are a river delta, not a valley, but we are a delta. But we don't mess with the name. We're the RGV. We're 40956. We get it. But it's a river delta in a coastal desert. And It's the drainage basin of the Rio Grande below Falcon Reservoir. So the Rio Grande Basin goes all the way up to like the Big Bend and all the way into Mexico, like Durango. So it's a pretty big basin, but we're just going to concentrate on the area south of Falcon. Not much change in elevation, basically sea level to 900 feet up in Jim Hogg County. That's an area that we serve. See the map there. It's a little small, but you'll be able to see it. The curvature of the Texas coast creates these microclimate convergence zones. It's really interesting how that works, and talk over that a little bit later. The Mexican plateau contributes to the desert climate. So you have those higher mountains and a plateau above them, the Sierra Madre, and as air comes down the slope of it, it dries out, and that creates kind of this desert type feel that we have here in the valley. So it shows up on annual precipitation. The state of Texas, I like to tell people it's a country. It is the Republic of Texas. It really is. And in weather and climate wise, it is. And you can see that on the southeast part of the state, you get upwards of 54 inches of rain a year. That's truly tropical, and it's very lush and lots of swamp and lots of tall trees and everything else. But then if you look down the center of the state, I don't know if I have a laser pointer here or not. Well, it won't matter because it's on the regular screen. So you can see right down the center of the state, you see the greens go to yellow. And basically that's your dividing line between good rainfall, lighter rainfall, and very low rainfall, especially as you get out towards El Paso. But notice here in the valley, a pretty sharp change from the coast all the way out to like Zapata County. If you've ever driven out there and seen the lay of the land, you'll see it's a whole different ball game in terms of what grows out there. It's not just mesquite, but you'll see cacti out there. Versus not just prickly pear, but you'll see real cactus out there. So it is a different type of climate. So what do we mean by that? We look at the Köppen climate types of Texas, and on the big green area, it's called humid subtropical, which is known as CFA. And then look to the west from basically I-69C, which is McAllen, Edinburgh, and out to the west, it's now in the semi-arid hot region, or BSH. So you go from CFA to BSH, and that's what I meant, but when you drive out to Star Zapata County, it looks a bit different. What's interesting is the older Köppen climate curves from, say, 1990 showed only Star and Zapata County in the BSH. That's moved eastward. And it's an interesting sign of things we think to come, where it may go further east over the next 20 to 40 years. So the general climate of the valley, what is that? Of course, most of you all live here. I guess you all live here. How many are native? Oh, not too many. How many came from somewhere else? Anyone come from like the Northeast US, like me? Very good. Maryland is my hometown. I know it's Barbara's too, so we're very familiar with that. So the lower valley, which is actually a lowercase L, because overall this whole region, the 4-county area, is known as the capital lower valley, because there's a mid valley, which is around the Big Bend, and there's an upper valley by El Paso up into New Mexico. But we're going to talk about the lower part of the lower valley, smaller case L, which is where we're sitting right now. So you can see that we are in the CFA going to the BSH area, semi-arid. And then terrain exerts very little influence on our weather, does not impede the passage of transient systems such as fronts and whatnot. The Laguna Madre, Gulf of Mexico do moderate the weather. We get a sea breeze effect in the summer, and it can modify polar outbreaks, but I got to be honest with you. I lived in Florida for 9 years. They really do have a sea breeze aspect there because it's a true peninsula. Here, the sea breeze happens, but it's not the same. That's why we have a semi-arid steppe, and Florida is completely subtropical. You know, there's no part of the state that stays dry all the time. We have a dry season, a wet season, but here we have like drier, and driest sometimes. So the modified outbreaks can be experienced when the cold air mass is sufficient to move fronts deep into Mexico. I like to call a one-sided peninsula that does not block cold air from the northwest. Just had it, Christmas time, right? Got really cold really quick. It doesn't always work that way in Florida. I mean, we literally went from the mid-70s, feels like, to 14 degrees right here where you're sitting in 9 hours. That's pretty crazy. And if you're someone who is without the right, heating supply in their building or house, or have the right clothing, that shock can kill you. So it's an issue down here in the valley. No established delineation of seasons. I like to tell people that the weather here is warm, hot, hotter, and hell. So we'll go with that. This is definitely readable on your screen, very small here, but this is the average. What the most recent averages we calculate every 30 years. We do an update, and these are the climate normals for Brownsville. I'm using Brownsville because we're close to it. It's our closest anchor city for where we're sitting. You can see that there is a mountain of rain, that big tall green line in September. That's why I say it's a dry climate here most of the time until September, early October, and then it can dump a lot of rain and then it dries out again. It kind of stays dry. Even in the middle of summer, it can be drier. And that's where Florida is different. In Florida, you go June, rainy, July, still kind of rainy, maybe a little less. August, pounding rain. September, pounding rain. In October, it's also pounding rain, and then it starts to dry out. Not down here. You actually have a pretty dry period from early July to mid-August. We call that La Canicula, the dog days. The dog days of summer, they are pretty bad sometimes. So you can see the temperatures here. What's interesting about the temperatures shown on the screen is that the averages from the previous 30-year cycle from 81 to 2010 went up an average of 2 degrees for the whole year. And some months went up almost 3 degrees in a month. So I think it may have been April or May. One of those months was like 2.8 degree increase. And we'll show you why that was a few slides down the road here. Yeah, the weather. So I'm going to start here again and just talk about the mountain of rainfall in September here in the valley, lower valley. August picks up a little bit. August is dry. August is dry. October, a little bit wetter than the rest of the year, but the big month is September. That's what's different in Florida. I was mentioning before, June to September in Florida, it's wet all 4 months in most areas of the peninsula. Not the same here. That's why I say it's a one-sided sea breeze, one-sided peninsula. So now let's see where we're going. Okay, so let's go back to 2022, shall we? So this is where we left off. What you're looking at here, for all the people online that didn't see the slide, this is the record heat and the red, solid red line, record cold and the solid blue line. These are daily records. The area under the light red curve is above average, under the light blue curve is below average, and the mean, kind of the average is in between all of that. And so a lot of your temperatures are going to fall in the mean, but wherever you see the spikes up or down, that means it kind of give you an idea of what part of the year was warmer or colder than average. So right here, I'm muted? No, I'm not muted now. Otherwise I get echo. So anyway, right here, from January through early March of 2021, it was pretty chilly. As I mentioned before to the group in the room, and y'all probably heard online, the first of the year we were in the 80s to mid 90s. It was 89 down here. It was like 85 on the beach. It was 96 in McAllen. Record highs by far for the first of the year. Polar bear swim, like I said, was a joke. It was 77 degree surf. And then one night later, not New Year's night, but the second, it dropped to 24 to 27 in the ranch country. We had a hard freeze up there. It was 31 in Harlingen. So you can see right here, there's January 1st right there. And there's January 2nd right there. And that's Brownsville. Brownsville is like 39, Harlan's at 31. And it was colder to the northwest. So you have a bit of ups and downs here in January, but a lot of downs. And that's when you see that a lot of area in the blue with these darker blue colors going into the lighter blue, that shows a below average. By spring last year, we started to go the other direction. You see more in the red. And then by summer, we were kind of right on the average, but there were periods here in July into early August before the rains came a little bit that we ended up a little bit above average. But again, it's kind of day-night temperatures you're seeing on in one fell swoop. And then by fall, once we got into October, the roller coaster began. So warm October start, got a little cooler towards the end. November started off very warm. We had the cold snap in the middle of the month for Thanksgiving. Then it warmed up the first 10 days of December. And then we had the Christmas freeze right there, which is close to a record, but not a record. So in the end, despite the cool start, and the ups and down roller coaster end, the year was the 12th warmest on record in Brownsville, going back to 1878. And precipitation, that's from 2021. I'll show you precip on the next slide. So this is the rainfall for the year. And what we're seeing here is the blue line is the highest on record. That's 1886, an amazingly wet year with I think 2 hurricanes and a bunch of other rain. That's the hurricanes right there. Then the driest year here is 1953, where we barely got rain at all. And the normals are kind of on the low side, as we mentioned before. We're a semi-arid steppe, and Brownsville's close to humid subtropical. You follow the green, that's the rainfall for the year last year, and wherever the green is above, that means we're above the average at the time. As we get later in the year, you see where the green kind of tracks along with the averages, goes a little bit above, a little bit below, and then back above. This was the November rainfall that put Brownsville above barely for the year. But there are pockets of time where it was drier than average. There are pockets when it was wetter, and this is the accumulation. So if you have a dry summer but a wet spring, it'll just sit on this number here, which is no rain, right? So, and that's no rain. So December, no rain. And from basically the end of May through the middle of July, early August, no rain, you know. And so when you add it all up, we were real close to the average, slightly above it for the long-term period. A record going back to 1878. But here's a number I'll always show. This one always gets people's attention. This is going back to 1980. It's looking at the regression line, which is the line that's orange colored here. I can't use the laser pointer. And then you see the actual values for each year, which is above the line or below the line. But notice the green, this is called a lowest curve. And I won't go into statistical details of what makes that named the lowest curve, but it's not lowest, it's LOESS, or lows, I think is another term they use. But notice at the very end where it says speaking, me, to get rid of that somehow. Can I X out of that? Oh, yes, hide that. Okay, good. Because in the red shaded area, you notice that the green line goes up exponentially. And that's since 2010. And why does that matter? Remember I said earlier that the average temperature that we use to compare things to, we do a 30-year rolling average. And we did an update in 1991 to 2020, from the 1981 to 2010. Well, what happened between 2010 and 2020 in Brownsville? Number 1 ranked 2012, number 2 ranked 2020, number 3 ranked 2017, number 4 ranked 2019. This goes back to 1878, and 8 of the 10 years of that decade were in the top 10. Yikes. And 9 have occurred since 2012, and that goes all the way down to this very lowest number at 2022. So that's a problem. That's a problem. Oh, and guess where January is? Number 4 right now. Number 1 in Harlingen, hottest January all time since the 24th of the month. And yeah, it's so cool today, but guess what? The last 3 days of the month, 10 degrees above average coming up. So we're going to end up in the top 5 in January. And guess what? We'll preview what the forecast is going to be through April. So 9 of warmest years occurring since 2012. That explains why those numbers went up 2 degrees for the overall on the year, which means when they get on TV and say, well, today was 10 degrees above average or 2 degrees above average, it's based on the new average. So what used to be a number that was pretty high would now seem like okay. So back in the 1981 to 2010, you might say, let's say 78 degrees, for instance, on the daily average in, I don't know, February, early March, and say, well, that might have been 2 degrees above average back then, the 30-year average. The new 30-year average is now normal. That's a normal day. But people don't always understand it. I don't use that terminology. I use the raw numbers. The raw numbers are showing us something. Where will 23 land? I'd bet $100 that 2023 is going to land in this top 15. I bet $50 it lands in the top 10. So, and it's getting harder to beat the top 10s because the top 10s are all the last decade, but we have something called global warming out there. And it really shows up here, but also shows up in other places. Up to a whole bunch of locations from North Dakota to Texas. And everybody's showing the lowest curve going up. So let's get to the weather events. There's a little bit of climate data there. We'll talk about weather. More frequent here, strong winds. Yesterday, anybody? Yesterday? Heat and drought. I mean, like I said, we're warm, hot, hotter than hell. So there we go. But like the early slide that we showed, the very first slide, perpetual drought broken by the occasional catastrophic flood, to the tune of about $1 billion here in the last 5 years, flooding damage. It's a lot. Lightning, believe it or not, doesn't occur a lot often, but when it does occur, wow. we get some fierce lightning storms down here. What's less frequent? Tropical cyclones. So you're thinking, wait a minute, we're a hurricane zone. Okay, Hurricane Hannah 2020. When was the last one before that? Dolly 2008. 12 years. I guarantee you we've had more heat waves in that 12-year period than hurricanes. Direct landfalls in the Rio Grande Valley. So it's actually less frequent, but all the impact's pretty big. So that's why we exist as an office, is to forecast hurricanes. Freezes and cold, the same deal, less frequent, but they have quite a bit of impact when they occur here in the valley. So the valley wind machine, if anything takes away from this, you take anything away from this whole discussion, it's the valley wind machine. Because we're doing Master Naturalist, I talk a little bit about the impact on flora and fauna where I can. So I can stunt growth of trees, affect bird and insect movements day to day, alter moisture forcing mechanisms too. So why do we have a valley wind machine? It's the geography. You got the Sierra Madre Oriental, which is a pretty tall mountain range, and then you have the Gulf of Mexico not too far away, and tends to have cooler, more stable air, relatively speaking, over the Gulf. That's high pressure at the surface. And the lee of the mountains, you have heating, compression of air. What happens with hot air? It rises, and your pressure in the column goes down. So low pressure east of the Sierra Madre, high pressure in the Gulf, and it creates the winds that you see day after day after day. Now, again, they do shift, to change direction. They stop, change direction, go the other way. But in a couple of days, we'll be back in the southerly wind regime again. And it just seems to dominate here because of that geography. And that's why the trees are always tilted this way. I think I'm facing east, so yes, to the north. And that's why, right there, valley wind machine. So there's a valley wind machine that's a routine day-to-day one. We get 15 to 20 mile an hour fresh breeze, gust 25, pretty normal. And then you get the atmosphere playing along. And the atmosphere plays along every so often. This was in 2018. Big trough of low pressure in the atmosphere, big ridge of high pressure in the Gulf of Mexico. In between, you have a flow of air in the atmosphere that's going those directions, right? Going south to north or southwest to northeast. And that can actually translate higher winds down towards the surface, maybe up to 60 miles per hour just off the deck out of the south. Now you combine that with geography and boom, you can get some pretty strong winds down here in the valley, such as yesterday. So yes, valley wind machine in January. And January doesn't seem to be quite as bad for the wind machine, unless you're in a spring type pattern, which we are. This is not a winter pattern by any stretch. We're in a spring. We just had an F3 tornado, an EF3 tornado in Houston yesterday. Holy one, January? Now it doesn't. Now we can get tornadoes all year round in Houston. That's a known fact. But a level 3 in January is very rare indeed, and that's the spring pattern. And that spring pattern is this fast-moving waves of energy coming in. But notice that pattern right there, and compare it to. Oops, it did something I didn't want to do. I gotta go back. I'm thinking that the left side of this big button goes back, and it's not. So my apologies. But see that pattern there? That's the whole U.S., kind of the whole slide. A little square of the slide. Look at the similarity here. So you can see you got a ridge over the Gulf, atmospheric ridge, atmospheric low, south to southwesterly flow, speeding along in the mid-levels of the atmosphere, translating down near the surface, and there's your wind gust, 62 miles per hour at Harlingen, 58 miles per hour at the airport nearby. In Brownsville and the airport real close to here at Bayview, 51 miles per hour, and sure enough, we had some wind damage in the lower valley yesterday. But guess what? That wind damage is caused by really, really substandard construction. That's a whole other talk I can give another day. Like the fireworks stand right across from our office, I believe. So valley wind machine, big. It's not a big deal, but it's a persistent deal. And like yesterday, it can become a big deal. Last March, we had a 66 mile per hour wind event with the valley wind machine. And that's what's interesting, is that what climate change might be doing is straightening the differences between the Gulf and the land, and making these, and also the atmospheric pressure systems being tighter, and what's called a gradient. And so when the gradient's tighter, you can get really strong winds. And honestly, I never thought the valley wind machine would be able to put out near hurricane force gusts, but it did back in March of, I think it was this past year, or was it the year before? I know it was teleworking, and like trash cans blew all over the place. And yesterday too, 62 mile per hour gusts in a wind machine day. There was no thunderstorm. The sun was out, and it was like near hurricane force winds. We had that damage. So that's a big deal here. as the winds get stronger with the wind machine, we'll have issues more and more in time. So a couple big wind gust events in the last couple of years, which we did not see when I first got here. It's more like 30 to 40 on a big day, and now it's like 40 to 60. So heat and creation of drought. So you have different kind of levels here I'm going to show and kind of go over quickly. You have slow evaporation rate, light wind with high humidity, still get evaporation, the sun angle's high all year round here. Moderate can be moderate wind, low humidity, strong wind or high humidity. That's very common in spring with both the wind machine from the south and when these dry fronts come through from the north. And we actually have drier air with the low humidity and moderate wind. And then you get the, hang on, go back to, and you get the high evaporation rate right here, coming up. Strong wind, low humidity, common in fall and spring. So those first fronts that go through in fall can be dry, can be windy. You still have a high sun angle and bam, big evaporation day. But the ones we concern ourselves most with, especially a year coming up, next few months, is March and April. We'll have to see what happens. In March and April, if we get these dry fronts where it's still 90 to 95 degrees behind it, but the humidity is like 10%, and the wind's blowing north at 20 to 30, oh crap. That's a real problem for a lot of things. We'll get into that in a minute. It's not just drought. We have a flash dry day, possible flash drought. Anyway, that's pretty bad. By summer, you get some super heat blasts every once in a while. That's when you combine this downslope dry air with the fact it's June or July, and now you really bake. And so we had one of the hottest days I remember, the actual temperature well over 100, in fact, 111 McAllen and Edinburgh. That's crazy. That doesn't include heat index, but the good news was there was no heat index that day. It was the same as the temperature. So, but as a friend of mine who went to a Phoenix event in Phoenix on July 4th, they said it doesn't matter that there was a heat index or not. It was damn hot at 120. So the same thing happened this year in 2017. And that was actually a day where there was a tropical cyclone. The name was Cindy that made landfall near Port Arthur and Lake Charles. Not a big deal, but a high-end tropical storm. We got on the northwesterly wind side of it, dry air compressing. It was already a hot air mass, and it just made it hotter. So that's what happened on that day. But then you have something like this. Third day not charming, June 9th, 2019. If you remember 2019 June, it was really oppressive. This is when we actually had 100+ degree air temperatures and humidities that were like 50%. Now people say it's 100 degrees and 100% humidity. Well, if that happens, you're dead. So that's not happening. But 150% is bad enough. And not on this day, but on a day a week and a half later, we unfortunately had 4 migrants that were crossing the Rio Grande. They died of heat exhaustion. 124 degree heat index was over there in McAllen, and they didn't make it. And they didn't make it because they were hydrated some, but unlike a day when it was 95 with the heat index or 102, that extra degrees of heat index was too much for their body to take, and it overheated and killed them. So this was June 9th. This was earlier in that period. Notice some of these numbers, 121, 120. So air temperature 101, 102, 103 with the humidity, it's in the lower 120s. And that's very rare because we almost never issue a heat warning here because it's hot, right? When it gets that oppressive, that's a day that people can die. And even here in the valley where we're acclimated, we're not acclimated to that. Hopefully we don't have to ever get there. So when you have that evaporation rate of high to extreme, you can get drought. And if it's days and days of evaporation that's fairly high, you can get what's called a flash drought within 2 or 3 weeks. You go from green grass to literally a drought in just a few weeks because we have the evaporation, the high sun angle going at the same time. So I just mentioned all that right there. Got the little picture there from the South Texas plains, and then underneath it is Los Fresnos right down the road with a cornfield that never made it in 2011. So 2009, we had some all-time record heat. McAllen's average high in July was 104. Yikes. 104 for the month. There were days that hit 108, 109. We actually had humidity down to the 20% range, and the drought got really bad. But fortunately, we didn't have any other bad impacts like wildfires. 2011, record driest year, water driest year ever in the state of Texas. $5 billion in agricultural loss in the state of Texas. That drought continued through 2013. I'll show you 2022 and 2023. We're sitting on the edge, and we have some potentials to go pretty bad in drought for some areas in the valley. Down here, not quite so bad. We've been getting just-in-time rains, but you go farther north and west, as this map shows, we're into severe drought already. So if you're up in the ranch country, in the brush country, in the coastal plains, it's bad out there. But notice how there's a white area here in Cameron County so far. That's because even like the other day, a little bit of rain, dry for days, a little bit of rain, more rain, humid, and it's been holding us in check for a little while longer, but we think it won't last too much longer. So we're in a tropical desert. Mentioned that earlier. Erratic rainfall is normal in the desert. La Nina years tend to be drier for the valley, and that's the case right now, 2022 and 23. I'll show you that momentarily. You can see the drought area north of the valley, but also Starr County's involved. And El Nino years tend to be wetter, but not always. We can have situations where it gets dry in El Nino years, but it's detrimental to Atlantic hurricanes. But like I say, it only takes one. No matter what your La Nina, El Nino, La Nada. You're in any of those, you get a hurricane here, it doesn't matter what that was. You know, people aren't going to care. So we are in a La Nina. It's been a long La Nina. We call it triple dip. We've actually not really gone even close to El Nino, which is basically when the eastern tropical Pacific is warmer than average by a significant value and creates thunderstorm activity there. And then that wind shear comes out into the Atlantic and kind of quells the hurricane threat. But in the wintertime, that energy comes across and brings good tropical rains to the area, not from a cyclone, but just from the nature of all that air coming across the Pacific into Mexico and Central America and over our way. So that's El Nino. La Nina is the other way around. When you have cooler than average temperatures in the equatorial Pacific region, heading east to the date line, a little bit east of the date line. When that happens, there's less thunderstorm activity, can't create the energy for the winter and spring, and it tends to stay dry across the southern tier of the U.S. Again, no guarantee, but that's what's going on. Why is it called? Anyone know why it's called El Nino? When does it start to happen? When is it around Christmas? And what's Nino on Christmas? Right. So you got that right. And La Nina, just because it's the opposite. That's the only reason we have a La Nina is because we have an El Nino. So it's not the female Christ child, it's just the other type. So we can flip, you know, drought broken by the occasional flood. Well, this was the water year of 2010. This is October 09 to September 2010. Record wet in some areas of the valley. All these are top 10 to top 15 ranked years. This is, you know, Houston, Galveston type rainfall, Florida type rainfall overall. So you can see the ranking is pretty impressive. I still show this map today because it's really impressive to look at from wet to dry. 1 year later, we had record dry conditions, not just here, but the state of Texas. So these numbers here are like being in Palm Springs, California, or Phoenix, Arizona, west of Phoenix, right? So we went from Houston, Galveston to Phoenix in just 1 year, and that's pretty crazy. And so you look at what happened in 2011, the whole state was in what's known as exceptional drought, the worst possible case. I think it was 94% of the state's area was covered in that as of October 2011. And it took a while to get out of it. 2012, we got better, but we still had a lot of dryness and drought. Any color that's orangey tan onto the deep maroons is a drought category. 2013, it's about the same as 2012. 2014, the exceptional extreme shifts into the Dallas-Fort Worth area. The valley gets better. Finally, we get out of it in 2014. But as we say, look how long that lasted. It was a pretty prolonged event. So where are we now, or where were we the last year? Well, January 2022, a lot of the state, northern half, was an extreme drought, level 3 out of 4. By the way, drought levels like hurricane levels, not 5. We have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then nothing. So 0 is dry, 1 is moderate, 2 is severe, 3 extreme, and 4 is exceptional. So that's the worst of the scale. Any red color is extreme. That's pretty bad on livestock. That's pretty bad on crops. Dry land crops will wither and die with that, et cetera, et cetera. There's a whole bunch of information on the drought monitor sites. Just go to drought monitor, usdroughtmonitor.gov, I think, or .edu actually, and that's where you'll find all this information. And drought.gov has it too. So you can see where we were in 2022. Again, the valley is okay for the most part, the populated areas up to the King Ranch, and the moderate drought, the level 1 drought, is over in Zapata County, where it's basically cattle. 2023, where we are right now, it's really interesting across the state. You've got pockets. It's just really crazy, right? So you get the pocket near Amarillo, Dalhart, where it's bad and bone dry. You go south of there, it's actually Dalhart, Dumas. You go to Amarillo, it's not so bad, right? They've had some precip. But you go a little southeast of there, getting towards Childress, it's extreme again. And then you go east of DFW, it's drying, but it's not super bad. And then all you got to do is drop south to Austin, well, Austin's okay. San Antonio's getting crushed. They just missed the rain. It's been one of those years where places have missed the rain. For the area we serve, which is this southern tip of Texas, this area here, the ranch lands from Zapata through Kennedy County, the King Ranch area, after August 14th, nada. They've had nothing. They've had little spits and spats, and that's it. But down here, we've actually had November rains, October rains, a little bit of January rains, not a lot. January's kind of dry, actually. But November and October, we had decent rains enough to keep the drought at bay. And it's just the way it's been. And the whole state's been like that. I mean, I haven't seen the state like this splotchy since I've been here. It's usually more aerial coverage. But the forecast coming up will probably fill in a lot of those splotches, not only in the state, but also down here in the southern tip. So heat, dryness lead to drought, and drought can lead to what? Fire. Yes. But we'll talk about fire and what can help prevent it. 2011, what happened? We showed you the water year, 2010. Wet, moist, what happens when it's wet and moist? What happens out there in the fields? Things grow, they grow real tall, they grow real thick, right? What happens when it gets real dry? They just dry out and they become what's called litter, duff, or tinder. Not a website, by the way, litter, duff. Okay, and so in 2011, it's exactly what happened through spring. We had no rain. We turned off the spigot September 28th and it didn't rain again until June. Literally, in the whole region we serve, and this is what it looked like. As early as January, this is a January fire. We actually had a 5,000 acre fire in Brooks, Hidalgo, Star, Jim Hogg Corner there in December that year. After it had been so wet for so long, in just a month and a half, it was fires. This was on the King Ranch, 8,000 acres, January, right there. That was the big one. The burn is called I think the Smack fire. It was the ranch of the Smack Ranch, 34,000 acres in 2 counties. That's one on the bottom as well. So that was 2011, and this was last year. Last year, Hayfield filed in the Norias division of the King Ranch. Guess what we had on the King Ranch last year? 70,000 acres of burn. What does that mean? We got to prevent this stuff. Only you can prevent Smoky Bear, right? 2011, 50,000 acres, 2022, 30,000 acres burned in that southern tip of Texas region. And we got to follow Smokey's advice. Nearly all of these fires were human caused, nearly all of them. Yeah. So we've had fires caused by fallen power lines. 2008, we had an event like that. It was a 26,000 acre fire. And a January fire in I got to figure out the year. I think it was 2017. And Brooks County was also a power line that fell and sparked. 7,000 acres burned in like 3 hours. It was really fast. But last year's fires, let me give you some examples. It's really interesting. Got a stat pack here. King Ranch, we don't know. Because the King Ranch doesn't reveal they don't bring out their dead. I don't want to say that way, but they don't bring out their reasons. So I don't want to say it literally, hopefully not. But we think it was farmers who probably don't speak English, who are ranch hands and were driving tractors and stuff on the ranch. And the catalytic converters create sparks, and it's a windy day. Away it goes. 11,000 acres later, 14,000 acres later, the Hayfield fire, right? That was in the Norias division. We had them in the Santa Gertrudis division, 51,000 acres. That's the one up in Clayburgh County, goes into Jim Wells. Then we had the Encino division. There were several fires there. And then there's one more division I'm forgetting. But all of them had fires, and we don't know, but we think. And maybe we're going to find out. I'm going to a meeting in February up in Valforias about this. I want to ask them, hey, what's going on, guys? So to bring the King Ranch people in there. Because it matters. Why? Because all of our firefighters in the valley will go up and will be summoned to help put that fire out in the King Ranch. It can be a day fire, a night fire, the extended fire for 2 or 3 days, and that's what they're there for, to help that out. They're not helping us locally. Other fire starts. Playing with matches, 588 acres in southeastern Starr County. I forget what month that was. I think it was March. 2 vehicle rollovers on March 30th last year. I was working that day. 470 acres near the South Texas airport there on Route 490 in Edinburgh. Vehicle rollover by a border patrol chase. And the vehicle rolls and rolls and rolls and blows up. The winds are blowing, the ground is dry, and away it goes. Now you got to call in your resources. Another one was in southwest Hidalgo. Fortunately, that was a 10-acre fire, and that one got put out pretty quick. So matches, vehicles, and farm equipment, we know for a fact caused probably the majority of the fires that we saw. But there were, I think, others that may not have been direct human cause. But Smokey's there for a reason. And our goal this spring, because of what we're seeing in the forecast we'll get to, is to prevent those fires. So let's go from fire to flood. So the valleys of River Delta, low-lying flat, torrential rain has nowhere to flow. And you add urbanization on top of it and land use of soil that's impermeable, such as what we do in Willacy County, and you've got a problem. So the hatching of vectors, mosquitoes, we do a lot of treatment for that, but boy, when it floods and it doesn't drain, they're not on it. Those mosquitoes will be pretty fierce for the region here, but they can be critical if they do form in mass. We've had all kinds of disease that come out of mosquito development. A lot of that's coming after heavy rainfall. So microbes can be harmful to humans and wildlife due to slow or poor drainage. It's not just mosquitoes that get into that murky water, other things do too. And so unfortunately, we have to deal with it because of the combination of land use, nature of the delta, and urbanization really made it interesting. So a freshwater or inland flood like Dolly and the 2018 to 2021 events, we look at it as 3 feet or more of standing water or slightly lower events that get into homes, businesses, rainfall. River flood is like it sounds along a river or creek or stream. But notice that the Rio Grande is man-controlled for the most part. It's the reservoir releases that cause a lot of our flooding here on the Rio Grande. But it's not the situation in other parts of the state where the rivers flow based on runoff. So here's a freshwater flood. This is from Dolly, not too far away in Arroyo City. Water has nowhere to go. 18 to 20 inches of rain in about 12 hours. And we get that. This is the one in Willacy County from 2015. This was a heavy rain event from a very slow-moving band of thunderstorms, dropped 9 inches of rain. Then 2 days later, we had the remnants of Hurricane Patricia that moved through southwest Mexico. The remnants came in and dropped another 3 to 5 inches. The water hadn't drained out at Willacy, and they had plowed over the land, right? It's October. The land's plowed over before September 1. It's fallow, and the water has nowhere to go but up. And so farmhouses were under 1, 2, 3 feet of water. Urban flooding is most common here. We see the pictures on TV from. These events here mostly in 2015 across the valley. Weslaco, I think Mercedes is in there, and the one on the lower right is in Brownsville, not too far from where I live. Floods on the Rio Grande. You might remember 2010, Hurricane Alex made landfall in northeast Mexico near La Pesca. It ended up going nice and slow with all that juice into the Sierra Madre. We saw the flooding in Monterrey. They hit 36 inches in the mountainsides west of Monterrey. And ultimately, day after day after day of rain in the northern Sierra Madre dropped between 50 and 70 inches of rainfall. And some people will come to me in the emergency management and say, well, yeah, tropical depression too. That didn't do it. That depression too actually hit us with rain that we kind of needed here. It was good to have it, but it wasn't a factor in the amount of rain that kept falling between July 1st and July 6th across the Sierra Madre. And when it was all done, it had to go somewhere, right? It goes downriver and into the reservoirs, which they have to release to maintain the integrity of both dams, both Amistad, way upstream there near northwest of Del Rio, and then all the way down here in Falcon. So you can see the numbers here on Rio Grande City. The top crest, Beulah and Alex, are back to back there, both because we have to release all that water from the reservoir. And there's a whole bunch of rules and regs on how we release it to ensure we don't flood too many communities, but allow the water to drain down. But where there's no levee protection, unfortunately, it will flood the area. So the pictures here, you can see at the bottom, that's the floodway. So if you drive over the bridges there near Sebastian going north and over between Mercedes, what we call Weslaco Mercedes, it's usually dry in there. There's some cattle in there. There's some grass growing in there. There's even some crops growing in there sometimes. That's what it looked like after Alex in 2010. If they have to use it, they use it. Why? To protect all of our cities and our 1.4 million people. So, and you can see all the values there from other gauging sites we have along the river that did go up. Because even though the floodway takes a lot of the water, the Rio Grande takes some of it too. And so the water levels rose. So if you ever walked across in Brownsville at the international bridges during that time, you would have seen really high water rushing fast with a bunch of flotsam and jetsam moving down. And the levee road where the Border Patrol worked, that was covered in water too at the international bridge here in Brownsville. So that can happen. So this is the floodway flood 2010. You can see the pictures there over the Weslaco Mercedes. This is the interstate, and there's the old Business Road 83, and there's all the water in it. This was Starr County, where there's no levee protection in the upper left, and it was a 2-mile wide river, which is normally 50 yards wide. So it's amazing how much water comes out and flows down. That was a mobile home area RV park that got flooded out inside the levee. Also a place called Pepe's on the River. They flooded out. I don't know if they ever came back after that, but it was pretty bad. Here's category nada, $200 million storm without a name. This is 2018, the Great June Flood, I like to call it. And if you look real close, I have a picture later on, you can see people walking in that water, 4 to 5 feet of it. This is how much rain fell. Anywhere is blue and purple is pretty darn heavy rain. These values rivaled Beulah. In fact, over here, this was more than Beulah. And out here, it was a little bit less than Beulah, but it didn't take a Beulah. There was no name. And why do I say that? Well, you look at the satellite and find the tropical storm or the hurricane. There's a lot of cloud out there in the Gulf of Mexico, but watch what happens over it's actually a 4-day period here. Look at all the reds and oranges in the cloud masses slowly move to the west. But there's no organization to it. There's no big circular galaxy-shaped thing. It's just a bunch of action because the upper levels were conducive to lifting the atmosphere and ultimately just dumping day after day after day of rain. Now, it wasn't continuous. It would form up overnight, go through the morning, and then peter out west. Then over here, it would refire on boundaries in the mid to late afternoon. And those dates were the 19th and 20th. So I think I got some pictures coming up here of that. I think. Okay, you can see it just going and going, right? But there's no organized system like we had with Hannah. It's just recycling itself on old boundaries and very unstable air, allowing it to lift into high, very high storm tops and rain like crazy. So I can get to the next. Here we go. Put look on radar from one of the events in Weslaco Mercedes. If you were out there, just lined up, even McAllen got a piece of this, and it. When you see red on the radar for 4 or 5 hours straight like that, and it's really juiced up in the atmosphere, you know right away you got a big flood. This fell right along Interstate 2. The entire frontage road had 2 to 4 feet of water in it. The entire frontage road was closed during that event. So that was June 20th, and we move ahead. Quick stats, kind of interesting here. Go back one slide. No, back. Okay, here we go. All right, so these are interesting stats, and what's crazy is that we had 11.36 inches in 3 hours near Weslaco, and this was a 1 in 1,000 plus year. Probability return cycle is not a year by any stretch, right? I don't like to use the word 1,000-year flood, no such thing. It's a 1 in 1,000 probability occurrence, and 2,500 homes were impacted. Actually, they call these major damage when it's 18 inches or more. 2,500 vehicles were totaled or heavily damaged. All schools were flooded in Weslaco. It was bad. $200 million when we added it all up across the valley from just plain old rain. So floods can be pretty bad here, as we mentioned. Land use, urbanization, agriculture, Rio Grande Delta, it's not good. Here's Los Fresnos, right down the road, literally 10 minutes from here. A streamer band of the same type of rainfall. It happened 2 days in a row, and at the end of day 2, that's what it looked like on some of these tracked roads that are out there. When you drive west, you get track 43, track 29. That's what it looked like. And you can see the farmland totally underwater, and see a number of houses have a foot or 2 of water in them too. That was a big time flood. So it's a cool drone footage that if you look on YouTube, you might be able to find it. I showed this to people, and here's Los Fresnos again. And I'll show this to people and say, where is that? And they'll say Houston and Harvey. I'm like, no, that's the valley. Was it a hurricane? No, it was nothing. No name. But It wasn't nothing for the people that got affected, so just need to remember that. And then it happened again, 1 year later, almost to the day. In fact, I put something out to some people saying, we're not going to see this again like we saw last June, because it happened on June 18th to 22nd. It's like hot, dry. In fact, that's the period we had those lives lost on the river, and some of the highest heat indexes I've ever seen. It was a really rain-free but incredibly humid pattern. And then came a system that linked up with other systems, and boom, we had this more localized rain event. But part of that rain event, where it fell 10 to 15 inches, was identical to the area that got hit the year before. So Santa Rosa, east of Elsa, Westlaco, Mercedes, they got hit 3 years in a row. 18, 19, and 2020 with Hannah. They were screaming uncle after all that. But they did put $190 million in bond initiatives into improving drainage. So yay, that was really good. It came out of all this. But anyway, so there we are with this smaller area. And this is what happened. So we got this band of pretty strong thunderstorm activity, some hail and wind out of that. And look at how it moves into South Texas. Look at this stuff over here. And so I know it's going pretty fast, but what happened is this area off of Houston there, coming out of the coastal bend, it comes flying down in the afternoon, and then there's some energy here in Mexico, and when they hook up together, you start seeing the river there. Bam, you start whiting there, that's really high cloud tops. And where that maximized was in that area near Santa Rosa, Mercedes, Westlaco, 10 to 15 inches. Did we forecast that a day and a half out? Heck no. Because look at all these pieces coming together. We cannot see pieces coming together like that, but we did get some hints on some of our models the morning of, and even the night before, like midnight or so. I was like, uh-oh, this could all link up and give us something really nasty in parts of the valley. And sure enough, it did. So I actually presented on that we actually have the ability now, within 24 hours, to start seeing model data that can connect the puzzle pieces and make it rain. But 15 inches, I don't think even then we would have forecast that. But we were talking about it, wow, this could get pretty bad. So moving from flooding to hail and windstorms, these are different than the wind machine. These are thunderstorm winds. These are very bad for us. Mid-March to the end of May, can start in February and linger into June. We can even have them now, but it's very rare to have them in January. Although the pattern we're in now could do it. So knockwood, we're going to get through without. Large hail is more common than damaging wind, believe it or not, in these thunderstorms, just a little bit in terms of the numbers that we've gone from 1996 to 2017 was the last time I looked at it. Hail size has been giant several times over, which means 3 inches in diameter or greater. The damaging wind can reach 80 miles per hour or higher. I do have some pictures to prove it. Last stair standing. Now, this is a Colonia north of Donna. Look at the wind speeds. Is that hurricane force? What's hurricane force? 74, close enough. It's not hurricane force, and yet this building is gone. And the family of 8 that was in it got out just in time. So I'm actually working on a major project with the state, federal, local. It's a bunch of groups that are trying to build resilience so that that doesn't happen again. Even though down in the neighborhood, there may be these nicer houses being built, there's a window of time when it's not done yet. That was in a Colonia north of Donna, relatively new one. You can see all the damage around. But you know why we can see that wind? Why do you think the wind is so low? Give me some background features in this picture that help me rate that wind. Wide open fields, that helps the wind, it doesn't protect anything. That's true. But what's in this picture that makes you think it can't? Wow. You look at that first and say, oh my gosh, 115 mile per hour wind, right? Category 3 wind. But why not? What's in this picture that tells you why not? Look up here. Telephone poles, wooden poles, they're standing. I know wind can blow through and around, and I get that, but really? 115 mile per hour, those poles are not standing. So, and what else is standing? Look at these. Look at these trees. There's some trees over here. They're fine. But what's happened to this house? It's not anchored down at all. Wind hits it directly, blows it away. So that's last there standing. This is a house that has some roof issues, but notice the walls are okay and it's anchored down. This is the same area, not the same neighborhood nearby. But yes, they have some work to do on their roof. And once the roof goes, the water gets in. That's what this whole thing was. That's the windstorm. So keep it simple for people. We just say windstorm, you know. But yes, it's a microburst. I mean, this is a higher level audience, so yes, it's a microburst. This one, 85 to 95 mile per hour wind. You're looking at this thing. When I first got here, I'm like, wow. You know what do you got? Cinder block, rebar reinforced, $5 million building. This is in Grande. Anyone know where Grande is? Do I know this building? This building was there for a little while. Guess what happened? 85 to 95 mile per hour. It was pretty strong, but I actually had the expert in the field look at this through my pictures, and we were on the phone. I said, his name's Tim Marshall. You might have heard of him. I said, Tim, I can't rate this over 100. I'm really struggling here. What do you think? He said, I'm barely getting 90. I said, why? He said, check this out. So this is called, or should be called, a bond beam, but there's no bond beam. So the roof is literally not connected to the walls. And without the connectors there, we talk about anchors, braces, and connectors. No connectors. The wind hits orthogonally, perpendicularly, like a kick. And down goes the exterior wall. And once the wind gets in, it's got to go out, and it goes out this side. Total loss. $5 million. The mayor didn't like me too much when I told her. It had to be a tornado. It had to be 100. No. Your building was crap. It's a shame. This is interesting. I'm showing radar here because it shows what scares the bejesus out of me. We actually have a drill that we take this particular storm up here, north of Redgate, north of Lynn. This is very rural here in Precinct 4 of Hidalgo County into Brooks County. And we take this whole storm, we move it over the Colonias. There was 102 mile per hour wind gusts with that. We actually had a wind farm that was being tested. It was one wind turbine that was being tested right underneath that area of light green and pink. And they measured 102. 102 at 10 meters, about 33 feet. Imagine if that hits a colonia. Now we get really 102 hitting a colonia. What's going to happen to all those buildings there and people in them? So that's what keeps me up at night, because this is a squall line in the afternoon, but a lot of them come at night, as we've seen. What if it comes like that? What if it's 95 to 105 and not 70 to 80 or 60 to 70? Big, big difference. Hail, this is a McAllen hailstorm. World famous picture. I don't think it's in here, but there's a picture from Starbucks that went viral. We put it up on our Facebook page, and CNN, Fox, all the networks had it. 1 million hits, I think. Those are tree leaf debris. It's bare trees. They're not bare normally. It's late March. They're all beautiful green, but that hail was being driven by hurricane force winds. And BMW dealership, total BMWs. 6-foot drifts of hail down to 3 feet by the time we got there. And this is 6 inches of hail. Looks like snow, right? That's at, I think that's the shopping center just north of Nolana and 10th Street. And this one is a little farther east near us, Rio Hondo. That was what the atmosphere looked like. The thunderstorm cell, overhanging top, lots of moisture in here. Freezing layer is down here, so it's a lot of juice well above freezing layer. And someone had calipers, they measured 3-inch diameter stones. Caused a bit of roof damage in Rio Hondo. Lightning, mentioned that before, that we do get lightning, and it's infrequently through the year, but boy, when it comes in certain times, it's bad. Stronger spring storms or clusters, like the ones that produce that hailstorm, can drop 300 strikes in 15 minutes. Sea breeze-induced storms, more common from June to September. Those scare me a little bit, because if you're on the beach and you get hit by one coming in, it could cause some issues for people on the beach, but it's not that common here that way. The additional nitrogen can spur quick growth of grasses. That's kind of nice if you can get it with the rain. Without the rain, it doesn't do much. It can start a fire, so we don't want that to happen. But there's your frequency. I mean, Houston is ground zero in Texas for lightning strikes. 10 to 14 per square kilometer per year. That's a lot of lightning per square kilometer. But down here, it's only 2 to 3, 1 to 2 in the valley per square kilometer per year, which means everybody gets a strike, you know, but hardly any. You average it out. Florida, of course, is jackpot, 14 plus. And having lived there, I can tell you that I've been in buildings that were struck. And fortunately, I was not touching metal. Although if you do, it's going to feel tingling. So anyway, let's go over hurricanes real quick. We're near the end. Long duration flooding rains. So I got some stuff on winter too. Storm surge, salt spray, animals, birds can sense the arrival well in advance. We've seen that. Natural habitat is terrible what it destroys, and not the case for vectors or pests. They can seize the opportunity, such as pine bark beetle, like here. This is a combination of, I think, yeah, pine bark beetle infestation was because of all the salt water and air that weakened the tree from inside out. The pine bark beetle is saying, oh, cool, dead tree, I'm going to go attack it. So it got kind of ugly. And then look at Bay St. Louis. I mean, beautiful greenery, nice homes on this coastline, and everything is stripped bare from Katrina. But notice the brown now, these browns of all the salt water intrusions. So that brackish, salty water is just, it really takes years to recover from. This brown is real too. This was from Hurricane Irma, strong category 5 at the time. Yeah, 200-mile-per-hour wind gusts when it went over some of these areas. Beautiful green, now brown. Of course, the green came back in time, but it literally wipes out your season when you get a hurricane like that. So that's crazy. The Chandelier Islands, again, green to brown. Notice how much got lost by Katrina. So that's Katrina post, that's Katrina pre. And you can see that they really haven't recovered much since then. Yes. It's a good question what it would do with the kind of flow and power of the wave action. I'm not sure. I'm sure on top that the top levels are probably damaged a bit, but the farther down they may not be too bad. But how it moves salt water around and changes the thermohaline, that's a good question. I don't know. But it probably does something. I mean, you're messing up pretty far deep in the water when you stir it up like that. So it probably does have some impact. Here's don't go to Texas. This is Hurricane Ike. Bolivar Peninsula, same deal, beautiful green, not so beautiful brown. Last house standing, this actually was called the last house standing. It was on stilts, the water went around, but what made it partly the last house standing was the debris missed it. All these other ones, some of them were on stilts too, the debris hit it with the wave action, and you get wave action plus debris, and you get like destruction or demolition, gone. This was Harvey in the coastal bend, I believe, Rockport area. And you can see what happens here. Pretty well built facility. It did withstand it, but the storm surge and the wind combined did a number on that resort up there in near Rockport, 2017. We all hear about the floods, but sometimes we forget about the wind and the surge. And it wasn't all that far away if you think about mileage-wise. This is Irma again. Now we're at Barbuda. Really, really bad. I mean, the four naturals aren't as clean as the other ones, but look at the buildings they're standing. And look here, very few are left. The other hurricane that did the same type of thing was 2019's Hurricane Dorian in the Bahamas. If you ever get a chance to look at the befores and afters, it's the same way. The difference is more buildings survived Dorian because they had built to withstand Category 5. And so you'll see more pockets of buildings that survive, but you will see this as well, complete demolition. Michael 2018 was a combination of storm surge and wind that got Mexico Beach. Mostly surge is what you're seeing here where that damage occurred. There were some buildings that survived that were built to have water go through them rather than go through them, if you know what I mean. And they made it. I threw in one for Ian, which was last year's storm in Fort Myers Beach. It was a sum of all fears event. We've always thought about this. When I worked in Tampa Bay, we were always concerned about anyone on the coastline getting a major surge event on a large hurricane. And that was Tampa's doomsday storm for a second there. For a split second, it could have gone a little farther north, but then it lined up on the farther south. And it was like, oh my, someone's going to get it really bad. And that was Fort Myers Beach before and after. Here's our own hurricane. What's that? Oh, Sanibel wiped out. Yeah, I mean, Sanibel got hit by Charlie too. So I was there and surveyed not Sanibel, but east of there in inland areas. And some of the places we had gone to Sanibel just a year earlier were wiped out. But Captiva was hit hard, Sanibel hit hard, and Charlie. They recovered from that, but this one, because of the duration, the size, the power, the surge, that one had more wind, this one had more surge, and it was really bad there. It still is. I'm sure it's going to take a year or two to recover. Hurricane Hannah looked like that. Hurricane Hannah's rains again. This time, these numbers are not too far off from what we just showed you in 2018, the Category Nada storm. This one was a Category 1. you just saw before. And most of the rain was on the southern flank of the eye wall, not the northern, but the southern. So some wind convergence, they helped lift the atmosphere better and really dropped a lot of rain across the valley from Hannah. But that was a tropical event. Freezes and cold, yeah, they happen. Let's go over that quickly. High impact, rare event. This is more for the wildlife and the wildlife, crops, and other things. So sea turtle, fish kill. So this is probably mostly a naturalist type of discussion here. Hard freezes will damage or kill sensitive plants. The big one was just a year ago, 2 years ago now. Wow, time flies. 2021. 305 million to citrus that we know of. We think probably 1 to 1.5 billion in agriculture damage in the valley. When you add up everything, including the King Ranch, which doesn't really report, but we know there was probably livestock losses there. Thousands of ornamental plants. We also lost most of our emperor palms. The ones that did get knocked out in 2011 got wiped out in 2021. Why we were planting them is besides me, because they don't work for the climate zone we're in. But I think people figure, well, we're building new. It's same latitude as Palm Beach, Florida, Naples, Florida. We can do it. And we built in 1995. Our tree's doing great, not realizing that these freezes can hit. And it finally came. You know, it took a while, but those trees were beautiful, tall. Some of them were worth $15,000, and they were lost. We had a record sea turtle cold stun event, 6,7,500 right here on South Padre in Laguna Madre, a total of 10,500 in the state. Amazing pictures from that too. This is what the atmosphere looked like. We talked about the valley wind machine, the troughs of low pressure. When they dive down here and you have a ridge in the Gulf, that's one thing. When you have a big trough of low pressure, the cold air is up there and it's just taking it all the way from the North Pole down. And that's what happened here. So all of Texas was involved with that. And notice there's no ridge of high pressure sitting out here in the Gulf to bring the warm air up. It's all cold air just flowing in. We had days and days of it. I mean, this was at the peak of the cold, the morning of February 15th, 3 degrees in Austin, 7 San Antonio, -1 in Childress, Wichita Falls, -8 in Amarillo, 20, that's not a 28, it was 22 actually here, 17 up in, 20, it says 28 here, but I think it was actually 22 at the time. So basically 15 to 22 degrees across the region we serve in the southern tip right here. And it was cold the following night too. And the day of this, it's indicative of freezing in most areas. So it was one of the coldest days we had seen in Texas since 1989. I call it the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, but it wasn't quite that bad. But a lot of, the emperor palms were gone. So notice here is an emperor palm. That palm no longer exists, it's been replaced. All these trees here were damaged. They were replaced with more hardy plants over the next 6 months. Citrus loss, I said 305 million. That's what we know. You can see it right there. That's in the Mid-Valley. And that was the incredible sea turtle rescue. So while this part wasn't the massacre, this was the savior right here. I mean, these sea turtles went back out en masse, I think a week or two later. They were all protected in the warmth of the South Padre Island Convention Center. So they ended up staging all of them. Records were shattered that day. For that day, it's not the coldest on record, period, but I mean, Brownsville's all-time record was 25. We broke it by 3 degrees. It was 1895. That was the last time it was this cold in mid-February, before we had the population, before we had all the citrus we do and all the $1 billion in agriculture. We had ag then, but it was much less than we do now. And look at these numbers. I mean, Harlingen 23 versus 35. And their records don't go back as far, but sites that didn't have records back to 1895, we busted the records by more than 10 degrees. We broke the record by more than 10 degrees, which just shows you how bad this was. Most people weren't here. Even generations weren't here because we're going back to the 1890s. The high temperatures that day, look at this. This is pretty crazy. Again, not a lot of records going back. Brownsville goes to 1878 though. This is only got to the low to mid 30s most areas, and prior, because it is February, the normal high in late February is about 78. Right? So to be 50 is to be 28 degrees or 25 degrees below the average, 28 degrees below the average, 34. So do the math. 78 minus 34 is what, 44 degrees below the average? Yeah, that's going to kill some stuff, especially new growth that we tend to get in February. So that was a really bad event. 2011 was the one I remember before the big freeze. This was a neat ice storm, not so neat for young trees. And then we had the snow. The white Christmas notwithstanding, this was the neat snow. That picture there was out from Jimhaw County, 3 to 4 inches fell. And I have a picture, I think, of the whole area. Let's see if it comes up. Here we go. So in the end, the winter was warm for some and slightly dry, but the period of cold fronts and dampness and freezes and all that was pretty memorable. Like people will say 2017 was a terrible winter, even though there were periods where it warmed up. So, you know, February did end up in the top 5 warmest, and people remember this. Hey, it got better after the mid-December to mid-January cold snap. So that was how 2017 was. There's the snow event again, December 2017. Beautiful though. This is all lower valley stuff. The left 1 to 3 inches in the ranches, but that's our measurement in our office, 0.25, that's me taking the picture. 0.25 inches measured, and that's enough to consider it official. So it was the first snow in the valley since White Christmas, and because it happened around Christmas time, people had their decorations up. It was kind of fun. People were like, this is great. You can see the stripe of 3 to 6 inches, and that extended all the way to Corpus. So Kingsville, Corpus, they had a real winter wonderland going up there, but the valley not as much. We weren't in the energy zone. If this energy that created that had been here, we would have had the same thing because it was equally cold, 32 degrees everywhere. It was a very wet snowball type of snow that fell that event. So this is known as the McFarland pattern that can create that here. You tap cold air near the pole, you drive it down. Because you have some Pacific influence here, it's not as Arctic as like we saw last December, but it is enough to bring enough of the cold air down. And this is a disturbance in the upper levels that creates lift and produces precipitation to its east. In our case, rain changed to snow. But farther up, a lot more snow, as we just showed, from here all the way up towards the east coast of that event. What else do we watch for? Pelicans. We have strong northers with light rain. The pelicans trying to fly back to their roost along Bahia Grande might not get there because they run into a wind wall and then cars drive through a Gaiman Bridge. So what we found is that the pelicans actually run along the ship channel and make that turn going to the Bahia Grande because it is a waterway, but we put a bridge in the middle of it. Now we put some power lines in the middle of it too and some telephone poles. The people at the zoo are telling us that was really an idiot move because now you're making the pelicans have to fly over or under. If they can't get over it and they go under it, they're going to run into the wind eddies and then the cars are going to hit them. So, but the good news is there are the Pelican Watch warriors. And the Pelican warriors that come out, they actually will slow traffic down and help to move pelicans and move them along. And they've really reduced the amount of pelican deaths. We've had thousands, now we're down to like less than 100 in these events. But we think light rain combined with the north wind and colder temperatures is when they make that move. They see the rain on the road as maybe the beginning of the Bahia Grande and try to maybe dive towards it, and that's the worst situation for them. So happens in November, December, January, possibly early February, and then it seems to fade away. Well, that was 2018's ice storm. That was right after the December snow. So we had kind of back-to-back events that winter. It just goes to show you that you can get it. You know, you can have winters where we have winter, you know, for a month period. Weather and man-made disasters, Deepwater Horizon. This was interesting. You remember what happened with Deepwater across Louisiana and I think part of the Mississippi coastline. And then you come down here and you're like, what the heck is that? Anybody know what that is? That's a tar mound or a tar hill. And then around it are tar balls. And on that day, this was Labor Day Saturday. So notice there's a lot of rough surf out here, but it's a beautiful, hot summer day. And what's going on here, we think, is that Tropical Storm Lee is producing a rare but persistent and wave train or swell train from the northeast to the southwest, and that's where Deepwater Horizon was. And that was back in April, May, and June, I believe, that same year. So you're thinking, oh, it should be over by then. It was never over. It took a long time. And we think that's what happened. No one said anything about it, but it made a lot of sense meteorologically, right? I mean, we don't normally get a northeasterly swell except when a hurricane comes in certain directions, and that's the direction it needs to be. And so, our beaches, we had lots of wave action from that, but at the same time, where did those come from? Because they weren't there 5 days earlier, because I was down on the island 5 days earlier. So that's what I think happens. That could be where humans interact and create issues. So to end it here, by the way, any questions from the room or online? I'm just getting late. So depends on where you're looking. If you're looking at South Padre Island, that area, we want to say somewhere between 8 and 14 feet. And I want to say that's tide water. That's in other words, combined surge with the actual tidal value. And Beulah was one of them. And the 1933 storm, Labor Day storm, was another. And one in the 1800s may have done it as well. Farther north is where those 14-foot values were. So along the Kennedy County Island, which is known as Padre Island National Seashore, or PINS, there's some 14-footers there. Port Mansfield with Hurricane Allen, I think we had 13 feet of surge there, whereas down here is more like 7. So that's generally a number. The potential for 20 feet of surge is there, especially coming into the ship channel where water piles up. The barrier island, the water will wash over it. So the most surge we think we'll see on the barrier island down here between like 8 and 10, 8 and 11. That's bad enough, right? Don't talk about tsunamis, though. That's a whole different ballgame. Any other questions from the room? I don't have an answer for that. Yeah, if the year that the reservoir went really low to modern record levels was between 1998 and 2002. So it's probably that one that you're looking at, although we could go back and look into the 1950s as well. Before the reservoirs were constituted, there were some big droughts then too, and it might have been one of those years too. But if it's more modern, it would probably be 98 to 2002. Probably 2002, probably the year, but that whole window is pretty good. Yeah. Well, bad news on that front. If the forecast pans out, we're going to see in a minute. The Falcon level right now is at 17.4%, which is among the lowest, if not the lowest, going back 30 years or more to start the year. Hopefully things will break a little bit as we get into summer, early fall, but if they don't, if it's like last summer, we're going to be looking at water shortages across a lot of the valley, not necessarily here, but farther up. So yes. So if you looked at the 2018, 19, and 20 rainfall maps that showed that bullseye between Weslaco, Mercedes, Santa Rosa, like the Hidalgo Cameron line, to be honest with you, it's serendipity. It really is. It's total serendipity. The atmospheric energy in 2019 just collided right there, like maxed out right there for rain. We actually had tornadoes showing up on radar in King Ranch. We didn't get any information, but we were positive of a tornado there. So that started off as a wind maker. We had tractor trailer blown over. We had 60 to 70 mile an hour gusts in Willacy County. And then that stuff in Mexico linked up with that. The boundaries collided. And where was that? Santa Rosa, La Feria, that's where it linked up. And so in Hurricane Hanna, we got hit by the general rains in most areas, but they got hit pretty good with Hanna. And the next day, the Monday afternoon, it was a convergence zone, 3 to 5 inches of rainfall, Santa Rosa. So they added 3 to 5 inches more on top of the 8 to 10. That's where the 15 came from. In the 2018 event, that was that Weslaco Mercedes event. They were in the heart of that one. And then the Mission McAllen event, they got the eastern side of that and got a little bit more with that too. Not as much as Mission did the 21st of June, but it really was serendipity. There's really no other way to explain it. Any other questions before we get to the forecast? Great job questions. Keep them coming. I know it's getting late. So here we are, the preview of the next 3 months. This is your basically Valley spring forecast, because by May we're no longer in warm, we're in hot. So May is kind of summery. We haven't gotten to hell yet. That comes in July. But this is interesting because, you know, one of the things, if you join our webpage and you look at it, social media and whatnot, one of the things that I do is climate outlooks. And I look at interesting patterns of connections in oceans, atmosphere, and that's La Nina, El Nino, that's other connections that are working for us in the Pacific Ocean and the Atlantic Ocean. And I kind of look at what the Climate Prediction Center is doing to massage all that together or blend it all together. And when I see something like this in the winter forecast, I think, oh, we got a messaging challenge here. And that messaging challenge is we're forecasting above average and dry, right? It's a warm, dry winter, but there's wild cards. And so back in October, I was basically saying to the partners that, okay, yeah, we're forecasting November to January, warm and dry overall. But guess what? The cold air at some point will pool up in northwestern Canada. And like a dam ready to break, that cold air is heavy and dense, and it needs the atmosphere to play along just once to say, let me gush it southward. And once it goes, the guardrails of the Rocky Mountains kind of stop it from going west, but allow it to just surge to there all the way deep into Mexico. And when we had the Christmas freeze, the really cold air in Christmas, exactly what happened. So how was December overall? It was above average, barely. How was January this year? January is ending up being a top 5 warmest. But those 2 months combined are going to end up being, in November too, and you combine all 3, yeah, warm and generally dry. But mid-November it got chilly, and we had the Arctic outbreak right around Christmas. So, you know, that's what that's about. It says, don't rule out the need to protect things like plants, crops, livestock, have equipment ready, have warming centers ready to open for people, all that stuff. Have it ready in October. You're not going to trigger it now. You're just going to be ready for when the time comes. That's what I do. That's part of what my job is. And our staff follows up as we get closer in time to the event. So sure enough, what are we looking at now? Well, question mark, mid to late February to early March, it's still there. That cold below average temperatures in the northern plains is still there all the way through spring. But by the time we get to March, we should be all right. But we saw what happened in 2021. February 15th to 18th was damn cold here. And we've had freezes into early March. We've had wind chills in the low 20s, like on March 4th, back in 2013. So I think it was 2013, if I remember it right. So looking at the long range pattern, I've seen some hints of this starting not the 1st of February, but around the 5th to 10th of February. Again, I don't know what that's going to do exactly. It's too far out, but there are hints that we have to keep an eye on, and that's coming kind of from that. So the atmosphere wants to do its thing. So for another month-ish, we have to be on the lookout for some possible cold outbreaks in the middle of general warmer than average. It's kind of what December was. We had a warm start. We had a kind of warm finish right around New Year's in that cold Christmas time. And in the end, it averaged out to be just above or just below average, depending on where you were. That cold snap was enough to neutralize it. But January, we didn't have it. You know, so we're a little cooler today, but we're still right on normal today. We've already been running 8 degrees above average in McAllen, which is, and I think 7 in Hards is number 1 for the month. And so what we think will happen is when we're not getting one of these, if at all, we'll end up being above average and drier than average. Notice they have this little nose of above average precip. Why is that there? That's the position of the troughs in the atmosphere coming down the pipe and up here and producing all the lift for rain and snow in this area. Well, snow early and then rain later. And that nose bends back into East Texas, and that makes it interesting for us because it reduces the confidence in how dry it will be. And I think the main time for that would be February, you know, where we could see potential for these systems to come through. I don't think we'll see that in March or April, though. But still, the overall sense of the season is going to be warmer and drier. So we move on to spring and March, April, May, and this is a problem. Hot, and look where the dryness is. It's out over the reaches of the Rio Grande, the middle valley, the upper valley. That's the water we need that's not going to come, that would flow into the reservoirs to help us with water supply in parts of the valley. Not coming, and yet the heat is coming, that's for sure. And that's above the new averages. Those new averages are 2 above the old averages. That seems to be 2 to 3 degrees above the new. And you may not think, okay, 4 or 5 degrees above average from the old averages. Day after day, that matters. What does that mean? High evaporation rates. We saw that earlier. That means you're going to lose more water in places like reservoirs and drainage ditches, canals, and ponds. And where's the water going to come from? It's not going to come from Mexico. You see how dry Mexico is going to be too, right here. It goes down there. You get into April, May, June. This is the heart of spring, early summer. Now we're getting really maximum sun angles. We head towards the solstice. That's not a good scene, and that's not a good scene. So reservoir situation worsening rapidly as we get high evaporation rates starting to kick in May and June. That could happen. And like last year, we were really on the edge with our reservoirs. We had a lot of stage 3 restrictions. Stage 2 and a few stage 3 restrictions came in from Laredo down south into like Starr and Hidalgo County. We can see a lot of stage 3 if this plays out. And that means heavy conservation. So if you know how to rainwater harvest, you know how to conserve water the best you can, keep doing it because we're going to have more of it. And then you get to the summer, you get into early summer here, late spring. Now it shifts a little bit. Above is still average temperature, but look at the precip. It's kind of, thunderstorm tropical unknown low values would lead to much worse reservoir situation. So if this followed into June and July like it did last year, we're in real big trouble. But if we get some rain from somewhere, and it could come from somewhere, then that would really help out. And that's kind of what this is looking at. Above here means that you'd have the high pressure ridges over here. You get the backflow into the mid-Atlantic, and maybe you get some backflow into the Gulf, which is deep tropical moisture that could help us out in mid to late summer, but I have no idea if that's going to be the case. So with that, just a couple of bottom lines here that I went over. Main thing to worry about is the potential for wildfires, and that's why wildfire prevention is huge. So if you know anybody, you all work in the business or know people in the business of farming, ranching, where fires can start, electrical, where power lines need to be shored up, get them on board now because it could be rough out there. We saw it last year. February and March were bad fire months. But the best fire is the one that never starts, right? As I said before, we want to make sure that happens. Water storage levels, just went over that detail. So conservation, irrigation, I call it the 4 H's. Conservation, irrigation, desalination, and there's another one too out there that kind of, really are part of it. I'll think of it. There's 4 of them. And then another freeze or 2 possible in February, similar to the last 2 years. Again, we had a freeze last year, February 3rd through 6th. Minor freeze, 31, 32, but it counts. And then a couple more strong cold fronts. So, the sharp change that we had in the Christmas event, we've had several already this year. You can very well see a front that comes through where it's drizzly and cold and damp, and it's in the 30s and 40s, or it feels like. The day before it could be 85 and 90. And that could very well happen all the way up until, say, like the 5th to 10th of March. So might see a couple more of those before we're done. And so that's why you need good heating. And with that, I am through. So any questions, I'll stick around for that. There's my information, so take it down. I forgot to bring my business card, sorry. But you can take it down from here if you want to contact. And again, thanks, Barbara and everyone for having me out again this year. And